again, Riot, the king of ethical companies, by the way, guys, you know, they'll have Pride Month for you, but then they'll institute policies that are illegal in some of the countries that they operate in order to trap the players. You know, Riot's great, the most player-focused company in the world, except when it comes to limiting the options and salaries of our professional players arbitrarily, right? That's not player-focused. Like, that's a bunch of bullshit.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. This is obviously the portion before the guest. So this is the part that we explicitly say is sponsored by Esports Bet. Presented, whatever, they were in association with, partnered, we are friends with, we would recommend Esports Bet. So obviously, it's obviously that crypto betting matrix. They used to say matrix, and now just say site or whatever, I think. But that was the original term, like matrix. I was like, it sounds cool, but I don't really know that anyone knows what a matrix means in that regard. Okay. And also, the only reference anyone knows to the matrix is to try and exit the matrix. So probably not the best song for that one. So anyway, if you've never entered this matrix, they actually have a deposit bonus. If you use our link for the referral link, you will get a 50% bonus up to $200 US. And of course, if you were to make a bonus, there's then also a separate bonus where they actually will give you a 50x DJT bonus when you do deposit crypto. And basically, DJT is their token that they use to play in competitions like the World's Prediction Series 2 competition that we'll probably talk about later. But anyway, let's get into talking about League of Legends. So here's the thing, Monty. There's two things I've noticed. One is this. One is that technically on the last episode, we got too sidetracked by all the like Reggie and stuff with TSM. We never actually talked about the TSM, the team in LCS. We barely ever.
We got Dhokla. We got Dhokla. We have Dhokla to flame them later.
We'll do that at some point in time because obviously, like, it's ridiculous. We still barely referenced them at all. Like, I mean, I know obviously the first 5 years of the show where people's going, all you do is talk about TSM, even though, as I pointed out, like, you could go run the numbers on that. We sort of got evidence that would show that's not the case in it. Like, we obviously didn't host 3-hour weekly shows where 2 hours were about TSM. Like, that pretty much goes without saying. I mean, if you don't know, by the way, we were even covering the entire world of League of Legends. Like, the idea any of it was about TSM. It's like, it's almost like people who are TSM fans are bit mentally ill. Oh, who knew?
Yeah.
So anyway, on this episode, the obvious big topic, because it just dropped today, right before we came out with this show, is obviously the LCK. I'll just say shenanigans, because what they've done basically, as far as I can tell, this is classic, like right within the fucking wheelhouse of everything I've seen in League of Legends as well.
Yeah.
Is they come out with all these different, like, fucking Orwellian terms for what each of these things is. And they've purposely done it where, in classic, like, modern dystopian nightmare fashion, what you do is, when you've got a clause that really is like, the clause fuck a young guy who's never made it in his career, you call that the, like, preventing young guys from getting fucked by evil people in esports clause. Like, they always do that. Like, whenever the clause is the opposite in it. Like, this looks really egregious because I'm already reading through some of this money. It's exactly what I'm saying here. Like, they spin it. The joke is every time they spin it. Like, I'll give you my joke because I still think my original joke is the best one for esports. You know, in the first Spider-Man movie that everyone now loves to remember, the one with Tobey Maguire, the 2002 Spider-Man movie by Sam Raimi, I always say esports, the best way you can understand esports is that fucking J. Jonah Jameson character, the one who was played by the guy in Whiplash and all stuff later, but before he was famous, obviously, right? Because if you remember, when Spider-Man comes in, he just, like, gaslights him, doesn't he? Like, no, the best thing for you kids, be a freelance. You want to be out there, like, bound in the street. Because obviously that's shit for that guy, isn't it? Like, what he's saying to you there, basically, is I'm not going to pay you to do your job, but if at the end of doing your job, you can, like, give me direct value, then I'll pay you something. That's esports in a nutshell, because what you're going to see here is, this is presented as though this is for the players. Good. It is just presented to fuck the players. And what's crazy is, the reason why I think we're the only show we can even bring this kind of words out, Monty, is because you actually have to sort of know the dark underbelly of the Korean scene anyway before this. So people who don't know some of the things from, like, Brood War, they're going to naively think this is like, roasting. Oh, brilliant, this is going to be awesome, it's going to improve things, it's going to be worse. Like, if you don't know, this is actually probably going to make it worse in Career Fight, I guess. Where should we start with all this?
All right. So I think we have to start with describing what's going on and why this is a big deal, because I think people just don't understand what's going on because it's couched in, like, very weird euphemisms and like direct translations from Korean. Like, the video that they released literally says to build a, this is a real quote, sustainable virtuous cycle ecosystem, which God knows what that fucking
Just
means.
word salad. That means nothing. That means nothing.
Might mean it's a direct translation of something in Korean that might mean something. Now we're
a general warning sign. Here's a red flag for esports industry. As soon as they use the word sustainable, they are almost certainly a crook or a liar. Because think about this logically, right? The word sustainable, you know, from the game League of Legends, sustain. It implies that you can take something back and continue, right? How could you ever, in an industry where you lose millions and millions, just by losing a little bit less, how would that sustain you? By definition, it wouldn't sustain you. You are still losing. So anytime that term's used, by the way, be very wary, because it's never used, I'll notice, by the cool people. It's always used in like, because what they're trying to imply there, by the way, I'll tell you what the translation of sustainable is. Like, let me do this thing or I'm losing more money. That's what they really mean. Like, they don't mean anything on your behalf or sustaining all of it, because that makes it sound like we're in some fucking we gotta have a sustainable source of energy and food for our new commune of League of Legends. Like, what is that? It's nothing, is it? It's fucking business, for fuck's sake. Sports.
So it's also, you have to ask the question, sustainable for whom? And the answer is for the franchised LCK teams. And I think we have to start this by reminding people that LCK teams previously tried to institute a salary cap within this league after franchising occurred. So they already tried some shenanigans in terms of capping player salaries. And this is just a cleverer version of that exact same thing. And what's so egregious about this, guys, is that, look, I'm not a lawyer, but the reason why there can't be a salary cap in the LCS is because in America, it's an antitrust violation. It's illegal in order for them to institute a salary cap unilaterally, the teams in the league, without there being a players' union to negotiate for players' rights. So let's be very clear.
Basically, every time you've ever seen in sports that they have the lockout and the players and the season doesn't start. The reason the season doesn't start is because legally they can't contract the players until they agree yes or no to the collective bargaining agreement. So what happens is, if they as en masse as player group with the union say we don't agree to this, they actually can't have a season. They have to wait until the two parties can agree on something so people can start working again. So essentially, by the way, for this as well, the other part you have to shade in, because obviously we'll get in a minute to some of the history of Korean esports, the crazy shenanigans they have always pulled, especially when there was no Big Daddy Riot. Like, they wouldn't even have asked about this. They would have just put this in place in the Brood War days. But this just looks to me, Monty, especially that first part about the rookie development, that just screams like this is essentially, I'll give you the analogy, this is basically a form of protectionism to try and stop China taking all the young talent, etc. That's what it immediately screams to me, because this sounds to me like a bunch of boomer Kesper people got in a room and were like, why is old PL winning all these things and don't they have Korean players? Isn't this Scout, wasn't he on your T1 there, Mr. Joe Marsh? As though he's in the fucking meeting, but I'm pretending he is, you know what I mean? Like, this just looks like they're trying to take these measures to stop that.
Yeah, and to Joe Marsh's credit, if we are to believe the inferences from his tweets, which is just like, he tweeted some like Lord of the Rings shit with like, you know, a soldier against an oncoming army. I don't think Joe Marsh wanted this. He's not going to come out and say it, but he makes it very obvious his opinions via GIFs. Like, this was happening last night at like midnight my time when all this was coming out. But there's kind of three different clauses to this. And as you say, Thorin, the rookie development clause is essentially a salary cap for rookies. That is essentially what it is. And there is no players union in Korea to negotiate against this. So again, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that this would be illegal in the United States to do this, because
basically, it looks sort of like a fucked up version of the NFL franchise tag, but that you can just force onto a player. So essentially what happens is, if you get some young guy, the best example would be like, think of like the Young Hoon guy who's on Astralis now. Maybe he was like a sub player on Kongdu or whatever, you know, and they notice and they just go, he has a little bit of prospect, tag him up. Now, true, it does have clauses like you have to play and you have to get your salary. That's not bad, but even so, it's clearly like, essentially to me, there's an obvious predatory component of this. Like, that just seems obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's so many potential issues with this, and the devil is in the details. So there are some things that will make this okay, but the fact that LCK has not released these details makes me incredibly suspicious, because if they were proud of how they're protecting the players, I would assume they would announce that with the announcement, but it seems like they're trying to cover up a bunch of bullshit underneath this. Again, I could be wrong, so we have to take the information. There has been no information in Korean or English, full documentation that has come out about this yet. Once that comes out, It might be Four Horsemen time, depending on how bad it is, to like break it down with an actual lawyer and have these discussions. But as it stands right now, the information is this. There are 3 different things they're trying to do. One of them, as Thorin referred to, was the rookie development clause, which is basically trapping rookies in contract prison for 2 additional years, which is fucking insane. There's LCK agent certification, which is KESPA certifying agents, which via a test, like they're being very vague around it. It's like a standardized test, which obviously is just, if you know anything about the history of KESPA, is clearly just ripe for corruption and cronyism, basically.
I'll give you the translation on that one. When they say, congratulations, there will now be a KESPA approved agent certification, what that means is KESPA will now make money by taking money from people who are agents and limit who can be an agent.
Yes.
So now, in other words, remember, KESPA essentially is the teams in Korea. Like, why the fuck would the teams get any say in who your agent is? Think how mad that is. By the way, the most obvious angle that opens up is, say you go to war with these guys, like an agent should, by the way, sometimes, with a massive team. You go to war for your player. At the end of it all, they just blacklist you out the fucking whole LCK. That's what's probably going to happen, right?
Right. Like,
revoke your license or whatever.
The problem is like, KESPA is supposed to represent the league and the teams, but if they're certifying the agents, as you say, Thorin, like it's the agent's responsibility to go to war for the team. So basically it creates a conflict of interest for agents who then have to be nice, play nice by KESPA rules, when that shouldn't be their job. So that's hugely problematic. And also this will lead directly to either them charging fees for the standardized test to take it, right? So KESPA will just make money, or straight up corruption, bribery, basically. Like, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it certainly opens the door to that, right? And you don't want that door even remotely near you in this instance. And the other one is that now they are doing basically what Thorin said was a pre-contract policy. So this is to allow teams to negotiate before a player becomes a free agent. And the exact rules around this are a little bit shaky. And I've actually collected all the information. And plus I have my own sources, obviously, guys, about what this is likely to look like. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we go into KESPA, because that's really about the agent certification, let's talk about why this rookie development clause is so shit. So first off, we have to remember that the minimum pay for an LCK player is 60 million won per year, which is about 45,000 US dollars under the exchange rate's really bad right now. It's very much in favor of the US dollar. Typically, that would probably be, previously probably would have been like $55,000 approximately. So it's not a lot of money, right? And so the minimum value that a lot of these rookies are getting, if they are on the minimum contracts, is quite low. And so what happens is, if a player has less than 1 split of experience in the LCK, or less than 1 year, a full year of experience in a foreign League of Legends professional leagues, then you are eligible for this development clause, which means that once you have played more than 50% of the total LCK Challenger League game, and remember what I said earlier, that minimum salary was for LCK, not for Challenger League. So I don't know what the Challenger League players are getting paid in 1 split, or 25%. So if you play a quarter of the LCK games or half of the Challenger games in 1 split, you are eligible to basically just get your contract extended. When these conditions are met, the team, critically, not the player, the team can decide whether or not to exercise the clause. When activated, the team will have the right to extend the contract of the players for 2 years, 2 full seasons. So it's not even the season you're in, it's the next 2 full years. The player is guaranteed a steady salary increase, which I have heard is 20%, which is not a lot when you're making $45,000 a year, right? That's if
basically, an LPL team's going to come in and pay you $2 million or something.
Exactly. It's like an additional 10 grand a year, guys. Okay, for after your first year, and continuous playing time during the contract period. So basically, the player is also being given a certain amount of guaranteed playing time.
Think how crazy that is for a second, because what you have to do whenever you take a case like this, this is where Riot always fucks up, and all the TOs and esports do. What you do is you take it and you do a dry run. You imagine a scenario where a player comes along, like it's happened in history. How would this have affected him? So I'll give you an obvious example, Monty. The example I think you've got to give, because we're talking about LCK here, is when you get some like prodigy who in year one they're a god. So Faker, how about fucking Chovy on Griffin, Showmaker on Dam? These people in year one were the best in the world, guys. So what that means is in year one, now this LCK team would be able to go, oh, thanks for playing really well. I'm going to trap you in this contract for 2 more years now. You won't be going and getting $5 million from LPL because I'm just going to give you the 20% increase. I'm going to make sure you play the minimum amount of playing time. By the way, there's even an element there I could even add in, which is when you consider the amount of like wasted games in BO3s in LCK, there's even a world where you could play some shenanigans with your roster and have the 6th guy sort of trapped while he's playing just enough games to meet the requirement. I could see so many ways it could be. Because basically, one thing I would very quickly take as a bigger point to understand this whole issue is this. Essentially, Kesper is like, just think of it as, in this case, mainly the teams. It is the T1s, the Gen Gs of the world. It's also other elements, like it's the people who run LCK themselves connected. But basically, what you need to understand is, despite the fact they're going to present it's the Esports Association, it's everyone. In reality, this is just cartelism. It's just people who are getting together. And what they're going to do, and this is a key point to understand here, is you're going to think naively as a fan that KT is against T1 because in the game they're against each other. They are in the game against each other. But I'll tell you what, if you understand how business works, KT and T1, the orgs are way more aligned against their own players than against each other. And I can tell you from my own experience in Flashpoint in CSGO and from seeing how people operated in Overwatch League and even LCS, that as a general rule, they will always side with the other owner in their little franchise cartel league than against like each other and battle each other. Like they won't destroy each other ever, guys. So the problem here basically is, whereas these teams are supposed to, think about any other economic system in the world, KT has to battle T1 for T1's players. In this case, KT and T1 essentially just go behind the scenes and go, look, there's no point us being silly and fighting. Why should you pay 3 million and I pay 2 million? If we both make an agreement, sure, we might not always get the player we want, but we only ever play 1 million. They will agree to that in a heartbeat. I'm telling you right now. That's why I'd even say that's the impetus as well as the LPL thing for why they've done this. Because we've already done one clause. It's already predatory as fuck.
I don't think this probably applies to T1. I think probably who was pushing
That's just an example, of course. I'm just giving the example of the big names, of course.
Yeah. I think the teams that were probably pushing for this are the worst teams that don't want to pay money. But
the mid-table ones, I guess, yeah.
So basically, you're let's say you're playing this year and you're a rookie, right? And it's 2022. Well, then your contract might be extended through the end of 2024 with only a year-over-year percentage-based increase, which if you're making the league minimum, even if you're not making the league minimum, you're not making $1 million as a rookie, like straight up, right?
No way, of course not.
So you basically just get trapped in a rookie contract. And again, this happens in professional sports when there are players' unions to negotiate other things, such as guarantees. Like there's no mention that this money is guaranteed. In fact, basically, if the only way the player can get out of this is if they don't get their minimum playing time, which means they're probably bad, which means they're not going to get out of this contract. But we have no information about, is the 2 years fully guaranteed money? So if the team chooses not to play play the player, right, and the player doesn't opt out of the contract, do they continue to get paid that same amount of money? These are the things that the players' union is necessary to negotiate so that they do have protections, right? There's a balance to be made between the sustainability of the league and the protection of the players, but there is no information in any of this about the protection of the players. So you could have a fantastic player now playing for 3 years on what is effectively garbage money compared to what they could earn. Here's another question about the rookie contracts. Can they be sold? Like, what happens if I can sell this player for $2 million to a different LCK team? That LCK team inherits that rookie player contract, is paying them $80,000 a year until the termination of that contract. Like, it could be a way for LCK teams to profit massively from selling the contracts to each other.
Yeah, here's another angle to think on that as well, Monty. What that essentially implies, because what you're saying, I imagine, is actually how it will work in reality. What that means is this: the team at any point in time can recognize you're worth millions and sell you for millions. You just can't ever make the millions yourself. Do you see the problem there? As in, if you're the player, you either stay playing for Team A till the end of the 3 years or 2 years they've added to your contract, or whereas you and your agent the next year would have signed for 2 million to some LPL team, they'll just sell you to them, but they'll make all the money. You won't make the money. That'll be their transfer fee. That'll go to the team. You won't make any of that. You'll just be playing for that team at that point in time.
And clearly, this doesn't help the players at all.
It doesn't anywhere. Like you said, the way you know it doesn't.
It prevents them from getting fair market value for their skills. Players in esports obviously have shorter careers typically. They also rise faster. As Thorin pointed out, think about all these players who in the first year of their career were absolutely amazing. Remember, this is the first full year of Zeus's career. He played some last spring, but he could have been tagged under this rookie system and then contracted under garbage till the end of next year, basically. And so it prevents players from actually developing and getting the fair market value. And let's be real, guys. The reason this is happening is because Korean teams do not want to pay the fair market value for those players compared to other regions. China will just pay more than these teams want to pay. That's all it is. That's what it boils down to. Because otherwise, they could just make the same offer as a Chinese team to keep that player that they developed.
Here's why
they do that.
The part people are going to miss about this is what I said earlier about economic system. You know how I always make that point in the modern day, Monty, that there's only so many problems in like NA, LCS I can fix, because some of them are just like cultural problems. The United States of America, the country, has like way bigger than something like I could solve on a talk show. It's the same in this scenario, Monty, because what fans aren't going to understand is this. What we're talking about exactly now, this is how business is done in Korea. Korea, it literally is a country of cartelism. It is chaebols, which are just giant fucking like families. Like essentially just think of them like Blade Runner. That's why I always say it's like the tech companies in Blade Runner, the top of the fucking big skyscraper. That's what it's like. So basically, that's the way by default things are done in Korea. It's why I said earlier, if this wasn't like the whole Riot effect and the fact that there's a Riot Korea in Tencent, they wouldn't even be messaging it this way. They'd just do it and they'd say, fuck you. What can you do about Wake Esper? Because if people don't know, there's an example from StarCraft Brood War, which was the game that Kesper had full control over because it was before Blizzard came along, hence the famous lawsuit in the early 2010s and tested the IP rights thing in Korea. So when Kesper felt like they owned and ran StarCraft, all you need to know is this: even though the players who were at the top level, it was always reported, were making enormous salaries. They were making actually way bigger salaries than anyone in esports in the West until I'd say about maybe 7-8 years ago. They were making 100, people like Flash and them were making $300,000 salaries a year. But here's the problem: they already had a system like this for how you could transfer, right? There wasn't a transfer market and there was no such thing traditionally as being a free agent. What would happen was this: if you wanted to go to another team, even though listen, someone could correct me if I'm wrong on this. There might be some details I could be incorrect about, but I'm pretty sure I remember correctly. Even if your contract is ended, Monty, it was treated as though you were still in some mad sense owned by the team you played for. And when a new team wanted to sign you, they not only had to like get the team to agree, not you didn't just go and agree with that team. They had to get the team to agree to transfer you. And this is the maddest detail. I believe there was some insane clause, which is pure protectionism, if you understand the implication of this, where the new team who signs you has to sign you, pay your salary, but then pay your old salary to your old team while you're not even there anymore. So as a result, if you can't see the obvious thing they're doing there, what they're meaning there is, well, who's going to win in this negotiation, boys? Would you like to sign for my team again? Well, I can just offer you 300k because I'm not paying anything extra. Or can my rival sign you? He has to pay you the 300k and me 300k and whatever else fee. Like, can you see how obviously those deals just aren't going to happen? And spoiler, that's why, and this is why I think they've done this, Monty, that's why in StarCraft Brood War, there wasn't a lot of player movement. You didn't get big, like, there was no LeBron James shit where, like, Flash and J-Dog are like, hey, let's team up together. Like, that wasn't even a thing. You just stayed on the same team pretty much your whole career until you were shit. And this is why, because they constructed the system from day one to essentially give every edge to your org because they were paying the money. So, unfortunately, I can sort of see, like, there's echoes of that in this. I think they're trying to reassert some of that control because the problem they have is, like I said, it's gotten out of control for Koreans. They're having to face all the negatives of like a Western free market, but without any of the upsides of their scene. So they're like, fix this shit now. So hence Kesper comes in.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that, as far as I am aware, there are no players' unions in sports in Korea either. So this is a business practice that I assume they are at least partially porting over from their like baseball and basketball leagues, where again the players are not represented. And as you say in Brood War, in the prime of Brood War, there were no big changes of players from team to team,
Very rare.
except when players went to the military and then joined the military's team, Air Force Ace. That was basically it. Like Boxer creating Air Force Ace when he had to go to the military was one of the only times in which that happened. And the team Air Force Ace was made by the Korean military so he could play during his military service. But yes, otherwise, obviously, that wasn't the thing. So this is obviously hugely problematic that these Korean rookie players can get trapped into what are effectively very, very low value contracts because, again, nobody's going to be paying a rookie $1 million out of the gate. So there's no benefit to the players here. There's absolutely no benefit to the players. And people will say, well, what about the guaranteed salary increases? And which is, again, bullshit because they're working with probably very low salaries and the guaranteed playing time. This isn't necessary to get guaranteed playing time. The players' agents can negotiate contracts with guaranteed playing time. They can already do that. They could do that at any point in time. So it's not a big deal. Like if a player was valuable and a team really wanted them, the agent could say, you must start this player for the next 2 years, every single game, unless the player opts out. That's just a thing you could put in a contract. So it's not actually providing any kind of meaningful protection for the rookie players by having minimum numbers of games because that was already on the table in a negotiation anyway.
I actually always thought, by the way, as a random aside, that was one area that Koreans, it's how you know they only gave a fuck about the money when they went to LPL. I've always thought if I was one of those big name Koreans who'd won Worlds and I went to LPL, I'd have that fucking clause from day one, mate. You're definitely not benching me for some fucking LDL player and having me sink like Save into the fucking depths and never be seen ever again. Like, that ain't happening to me, homie. You know what I mean? Like, I'm amazed people didn't do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that could certainly be part of a contract already. So it doesn't really do anything. You could also, obviously, in a contract,
or if you're the shy, obviously you have a clause where it's like at any moment I cannot play a tank. I can veto the tank. I love shit like that. They got really self-indulgent, you know.
But I mean, also you could negotiate year over year salary increases. Like it's not that difficult. So it doesn't provide any protection to players. That's just a smoke screen for this bullshit. On to the next one, LCK agent certification. Now, we touched on this already, but how can a governing body that has a long-standing association with the oldest teams in Korea, like KT and SKT, vet and approve agents who will be negotiating with those teams?
I can tell you from the sports I follow, things like the NBA, the NFL, European soccer to some degree in terms of business stuff. All I can tell you is this. If this rule existed in those sports, the entire landscape would be completely different and players would make way less money. Because the joke is, this is why I said it's so dodgy, it's Kesper doing this. Because in other sports, like especially European soccer, by the way, people hate the most successful agents. The teams hate them, Monty, because they're too good. Yeah, they're fucking amazing. They know how to get the absolute max value out of the player, how to bring in between the teams, the timing of it. So the joke is, if they had to be certified, they'd just never certify that fucking guy, would they? Like, it's just obvious, isn't it? You'll just get a bunch of yes men to the Kesper regime, basically.
And people who will not speak out, who will not fight properly for the players. It basically puts a leash onto the agents, while simultaneously, who knows how much these tests are going to cost to take? They're not going to be free, guys. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, of course not.
Also, it limits who can be an agent. Are they going to offer these tests in Chinese or English so that other people from outsiders can represent players, especially players that want to participate in other leagues or have those opportunities? Of course they're not. Of course they're not, guys. They're not gonna issue this test in Chinese or English. So it's creating basically 100% Korean cartel of agents within Korea who will all bow and kiss the ring to Kespa and the LCK.
By the way, I could see
oh, too bad you failed your test. Too bad. Oh, that's such a shame.
Let's be real. This is where you've got to learn if you're an American. You have been subjected to propaganda for years where you're not allowed to ever believe your country's allowed to succeed. Spoiler, they wouldn't even sell what Monty's just said as a negative, by the way. That would be sold as a positive because he'd be selling the idea that, like, Korean work for Koreans in Korea with Korea. Like, essentially, that would be
Korean
popular in Korea. Sure. They would love that because essentially that's another reason they're also doing this, Monty. It's another aspect of how they're doing it. This goes like this to me. look, even if this fucking Korean guy ends up being good and does go to LPL, tell you what, we're going to profit off it. He can go there, but there better be millions coming back this way. Because essentially, I can't believe it took this long to put the fucking genie back in the bottle. But what happened here is, this is how slow Korea is. They've taken this long, guys, since the end of 2014 to realise maybe it doesn't make sense that we can have people win the world championship in our game and then the next day be like, well, I have no contract anymore, so I can now freely walk across the fucking sea and go to China. And now I'm a Chinese player helping China win the worlds. Like, if you're Korean and someone's like, we've got to fix that. There's a loophole there. Can we just solve that? Like, they're solving it now. I'll tell you right now, they're solving it right this moment, mate.
Yep. Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. It's very clear because they don't want to pay money. And they're trying to be competitive while suppressing player wages because they don't want to pay the money. That's literally the only reason any of this is being done. They are trying to make it as difficult as possible for players to get paid during their prime of their career. And make it as team favored as they could possibly make it, while simultaneously giving Kespa a new source of revenue, whether that's through charging for agent tests or licenses, or, frankly, guys, you don't know how Korean business works. There's a lot of under the table money that gets thrown around. There's a lot of bribery, guys. There's a lot of it. That's not saying it's going to happen. Who can know? But I suspect it will happen. I suspect it will because it always happens. So I think probably there's going to be some kickbacks as well from the agents in order to get these licenses or to get favorable treatment by Kespa. But it's a huge conflict of interest that just shouldn't exist. I agree. And I look, I understand the problem that they're trying to solve. There has been a lot of corruption. From agents. Like, there's been a bunch of bullshit, and something needs to be done.
Actually, for Korean Chinese agents, they're probably some of the worst in the industry.
Yeah. So I agree that something needs to be done, but this is clearly not the way to do it. It invites
let's be fair,
a different kind of corruption, basically.
Let's just tie two stories together. This is also, look, it's not a direct response, but this is essentially one way also of addressing some of the issues of the Peter Zhang TSM story.
Sure.
That's an example of potentially corruption involving agents and go-betweens and all that jazz. By the way, Monty, one thing I really love, because the devil really is in the details. What I love about reading things from other cultures is obviously it's just a wash in their culture and their way of thinking and their perception. So they include this line here. And to you guys, you might even naively think this line sounds cool until you just realize, why the fuck would you ever phrase it that way if you're actually a normal person? Are you ready? Are you ready for this part? This is from the third part, the LCK pre-contract policy, which is basically them describing a really shit, fucked up version of what was already a normal contract negotiation, but that involves loads more fucking red tape and potential for the team to fuck you before you ever. So at the end of it all, right, after the teams have done all these things, they've contacted the team and made an offer for the contract, and then they've seen the contract and they've gone back and forth. At the end, they put this line, and the way they phrase it's so good. It just goes like this. It goes, let me see the exact phrase. The players can make the final decision after examining the conditions of the offers. So at the end, they think, this is how fucked in the head they are. At the end, they go, and you know what? At the end, the player can even choose if he goes to the team. Guys, the idea they're even putting that in and selling it as a pot, that tells you the worldview they're coming from.
Yes.
They're sort of saying, he is our property, but you know what? As a laugh, let's pretend he had say at the end. Essentially, we've already agreed. The team's agreed to terms, new teams agreed. At the end, we'll even let him say, does he say yes or no?
Right. Yeah,
I love the way that's phrased, mate. I love everything about it.
I actually think the third part of this could be done right, but probably will be done wrong. So this is the least egregious part of this entire thing. But again, the devil will be in the details. And because they have omitted the details, I have a sinking feeling that the details are probably right.
You could, in theory, by the vague thing we have written down, argue it's a way of making so there's no problem with poaching, it gets past some of those issues.
Also,
because obviously Riot has their own very peculiar poaching angle compared to esports. But as you say, it's so vague. I can't really know how it's going to be applied.
Yeah, and also I think there is a problem, I think, with franchise players and developing long-term fan bases that it would be nice to address in League of Legends, because that is having the reliability.
I was making this point yesterday, Monty. When I 2 days ago, sorry, I did one of my Patreon donated discussions. It hasn't come out yet, and the guy was asking basically the classic question that every topic comes up from LCS fans, which is why is LCS not as interesting? Well, one point I made to this guy, but I think it's a pretty apt point, is the heyday of when LCS was at its best was when you had established superstars that stayed on those teams. Bjergsen didn't just join Cloud9 the next season; he stayed in TSM forever. Fucking Jensen was his rival in Cloud9 / Team Liquid. Then Doublelift went between the fact that you had some stability actually made these narratives. They lasted years and years. Now every year we just re-up and just fucking, like, every year everyone gets Hooney for a year. That's not a fucking story. That's the opposite of a story. It's actually shit if everyone in the league had Hooney. That's just garbage at that point, isn't it?
Right. So, like, I do agree that it does help to have franchise players that are getting paid, but we'll get to how that happens in sports like the NFL and the NBA soon, after we discuss what this policy actually is.
Sure.
So this is very difficult to understand, and I've had to, like, pull from some of my sources to kind of get the parameters. So this may not be entirely accurate because the details are not there, but this is how I understand it is working right now. And it's not going to be for this year. It's going to start at the end of next year, guys, just so you're clear. The other things are starting right now. This is starting next year. The pre-contract policy. So basically, when a player is going to have reached the end of their contract and reach what is currently free agency, every team can designate one player whose contract is going to expire as to basically what we'll call franchise tagging. And they submit that player. So let's just give an example.
People who know the NFL concept are going to get the premise.
Right. Yeah. So basically what happens is, let's just say, now Chovy's contract was just renewed, so it's not going to be Chovy, to be clear, but we'll just use Chovy. So let's say Chovy's contract was expiring at the end of this year.
The face of one of the big teams.
Yeah, or Faker's contract actually is expiring at the end of this year. So let's use Faker. Faker's contract is expiring. So T1 will then designate Faker as a pre-contract negotiation, and they will tell LCK, Faker is our player. So what happens is that the LCK announces the list of all of the players who have been selected for this publicly before their contracts end. Then other teams are free to contact. It's unclear whether it's the team or the LCK, but one of the two entities or both of the entities can contact and make requests for this player. So again, this is before the contract expires. There is then a space of 1 week where the player can select 3 of the teams that contacted about their services, about their next contract, basically. Those 3 teams and the team that they are currently on have the opportunity to put an offer in on the player. At the end of that week-long period, the team that currently contracts the player has a chance to respond to those other offers, potentially to offer a bigger contract, right, or more favorable terms. And then, so basically there's a rebuttal from the team that they're currently playing for, which kind of allows them to, it's not exactly a right of first refusal, but kind of the same thing. Because right of first refusal would mean that they could just match an offer and that player would have to take the next contract. So the player could still select, a lesser amount of money, it appears right now. So this is all to say, though, that the player will have 4 offers, ostensibly, and then the current team will have the best chance of keeping the player by being able to make a final offer. And the reason why I like this is that obviously it will be a market value, mostly, we'll get into mostly, for that player, because there are other offers coming in. We assume the player will pick other big teams that would give them good offers or give them a good playing environment, give them good teammates. And it allows the team in question to actually be able to create a roster during the offseason effectively, because as we've discussed many times on this show, one of the big issues is you don't know what pieces you have when the offseason starts, especially if a player's in free agency. So this will help the teams build out the rest of their roster, because they will know by the time preseason starts whether they have this player or not, which I think is actually important, that you know whether you have the player that you most want to keep. So this isn't really the big deal of all of this, because the players are able to test the waters of free agency in a limited fashion. They can also pass on all the offers. It doesn't explicitly say this, but I think they can pass on all the offers and just enter total free agency at the end of this if they want. So they have that opportunity.
That's the part I'm skeptical about as to whether that's why I wonder if there is like a time.
That's an assumption.
Because here's the thing: there's a couple of things I can see just in the phrasing here that are a bit concerning to me. One goes like this: this is why the lack of details is what kills this, because you can't determine if this is good or not until you know how it would be executed.
Yes.
So one area that already I find concerning is they described it like this, Monty. So as you say, the team picks the player. Then once they tell LCK is like, here's the big list in the off season of all the players that have been selected. Then, as you say, new teams come forwards. They say, well, I want to make an offer. I want to make an offer. Then the player looks at those offers and his team comes back to him with their final offer, right? And he decides, am I going to leave or am I going to stay? Here's the problem, right? That entire process is like an ordered thing. Like it goes linear. Like this happens, this happens, this happens. But at the end, they just throw this in there with no explanation. They just go, are you ready for the way this is written? They go, if the player decides to transfer to a different team,
yes,
the new team has to pay a transfer fee to the original team. Whoa, stop. That's an entire story right there. What happens if they don't agree on the fee? What if I only give you 50K? What if the original team says we don't agree on the fee? Does the whole thing start again? How does this work?
So as I understand it, this fee is going to be a percentage of the player's deal. And it's
new deal, presumably.
New deal.
Right.
It goes further, Thorin. When transferring to a team in a foreign league, an additional amount. So it will cost more for China to
that's also where it's
buy one of these players.
Guys, because what they're basically saying there is everyone in LCK gets a discount on these players. So you can still go to a foreign league, but now Jack has to pay like 1.5 times whatever your amount is, instead of T1 can just pay 1 times that amount. Yeah, exactly.
And basically what this means is that I assume what happens is you only pay the fee if you are one of the limited teams who can make the offer before the contract technically expires. Now the fee would go away once the player's contract hits free agency because they have no contract anymore. So, but there's still like tons of shenanigans that could happen here, guys. First off, it's obvious that teams will be like, I'm going to put an offer in, but wink, wink. Once you're actually a free agent, that offer is going to go up, right? Because
you could even say if they did this in a clever way, this could be like an advert for like, but don't take this one yet. Just wait. There might be more after. Yeah, exactly. The joke is, why am I paying this fee to them when I could just give you this fee next week?
Right, exactly. Or half you get half the fee by waiting, right? Yep. So it's obviously like going to be abused. So I don't even know how you police this. And secondly, the other problem here is that it's still, by doing this, you are still potentially suppressing player value. And why I say that is, let's say a team has a $1 million budget for a player, right? They have a budget. They have to operate within this budget. Well, now they have to factor in the cost of the transfer fee, which is like, let's say I'm offering a 3-year, $3 million deal, and the transfer fee is 20% of that deal. Well, that's $600,000. So what I'm really offering now is a 3-year, $2.4 million deal because my budget says I only have the $3 million.
Think how dark this is, Monty. It actually incentivizes teams to collectively, again, now, notice, here's the problem, Monty. In a free market, you'd be fucked if you offered less because you wouldn't win the deal, would you? But what if all of us collectively just offer less anyway? That way, the transfer fee's less because the total contract's less. Remember, the downside of this is you're all going to think it's like a Western market. This is essentially like if you had 8 people and you make a rule that's going to only benefit us. Like by the way, the end goal of this, realistically, is the players don't move. They stay at their team for they
stay for less money.
Yeah, the team gets a deal that they benefit from. Exactly.
So, let's just say the value of the the value of the player is $3 million. This is what the player would get paid without this fee. So the Chinese team offers $2.4 million plus a $600,000 transfer fee, which is 20% of the total contract value, right? Like that's what they can afford. So at that point in time, the LCK team comes back and offers $2.5 million. So they're getting a $3 million player at a $500,000 discount. And that's the problem with this, is that it creates these scenarios where if a team does have a budget, it basically guarantees that the player, even a superstar player, is going to get paid under market value because there are now additional bullshit fees that have to be included. Yes. And the other thing about this is this might, like, and I understand the teams want to recoup that money from their free agent because they're going to have to spend big to replace that player in free agency. But again, there's no protections for the players. Like maybe if the result of the new contract was a fully guaranteed deal, so the player knows that no matter what happens, no matter what, if they get benched, their contract cannot be canceled, then maybe it's worth taking the $600,000 discount, right? In order to just make sure that your money's guaranteed. But there isn't any protection for the player here, as far as we know, because they haven't released these details. And it is super suspicious that they would not have, for PR reasons, said, here are the benefits to the players. As far as I can tell, there's no benefits to the players in this situation besides odds are that they get less money on their contracts. And they don't have any protections. They don't have any guarantees. And that's obviously super shit. So this is protectionism from the LCK. And I don't know how you can look at this and say that this is a good thing. In the NBA, for example, there are good incentives for a player to stay on their team because you can only get supermax contract extensions by staying on your team. So you can get more money. If the team that you're on is willing to pay you more money, then they can basically exceed the salary cap of a one player in order to offer that player, to give that player the most amount of money to stay on their current team. That's a good way to incentivize it. Now, you can't do that without a salary cap because in theory, League of Legends, a player could make infinity dollars because there's no salary cap and there's no, maximum contract value because again, there's no players union. So this is, all of this is very insidious in the way that it is designed. And like we said, there could be details that come out where this is good because it offers significant protections to the players. But because they haven't mentioned those things, I think we have to assume that those protections do not exist and that this is essentially just a racket that is being created by the LCK and the teams because they don't want to pay fair market value to players.
The joke is, and I'm purposely picking this because of obviously the context that what me and Monty just did the last few years. The joke is, this is basically why things like Flashpoint existed. Because when massive teams start noticing that their costs go up and their margins are worse and that they're losing money and that they invest in talent and bring it up and then it goes to another, what they're going to do is exactly this. They're just going to go, right, well, if there's not a way I can fix it manually, what if me and a bunch of other powerful people get together? Can we make a deal together that cuts some of these costs? Or let's just do a deal that we sort of sell players to each other, but for not as much, or we have a special system. Like, it's obvious they'd do this. Like, basically, the like you say, they couldn't even come up with some spin as to why it's good for players. All they did was, like, the part about the agent certification is just a shitty appeal to authority. Like, we'll be Kesper certified. I know who Kesper is, mate. That's a bad thing, if anything. You know what I mean? You're making it sound good. That's bad. So same, and then the rest of it, like, as you pointed out, is essentially just like illustrating for fans how, like, an agent could help you get more money, but then making it like part of some fucked up formal system instead of, the agent just being competent. Like, the joke is, if that certification thing worked, you wouldn't need the rest of these fucking clauses because you'd have certified a real agent who would get the guy the proper fucking transfer fee and would get him more money per. So that's all. Like, again, that's the most insidious part, Monty, is that part. It's like I said earlier, anytime they're fucking you, they'll present it that they're doing you a favor. So in that scenario, they make it sound like, but you'll get a year-on-year increase because I'll make sure you never get what you should see. Like, that's just, they're so fucked in how they phrase it in the message.
Because you're getting paid $45,000 a year. And so, next year you'll make $55,000. Woo! You could be the best player in the world. Like, Zeus is arguably the best player. He's in contention for best player in the world right now. That could be his life, guys. That literally in this system, it is garbage, and you have to wonder what the effects.
A good thing though. Here's the thing though. This is where you have to understand the difference between what you would enjoy and what is right morally. Like, I'm totally against a lot of these things in principle, Monty. But for my own selfish reasons, like, I actually do like the fact that, like, probably going to get some mega Korean world champions soon if they keep all the fucking talent in Korea. Like, now you won't just leave and mess all the storylines up. Now you will get fucking Rookie against Faker forever because they'll be in LCK playing each other for the whole fucking careers. Now you will get these stories of people staying in the same team because they'll be incentivized to get. That's all great for the narratively. It's just, as I say, the problem is for the individual player, it's almost inarguably worse.
Well, and it also just doesn't have to be this way. And
Oh, of
again,
course not.
maybe it's not this way. Because they may not have released these details, but obviously, like, we're incredibly suspicious about that. But it doesn't have to be this way. They could do things like offer bonuses or fully guaranteed contracts or things that would be good for the players at the same time. And it could be a negotiation. But the thing is, there is no union. There is no players' body to negotiate against. So why would they do that? There isn't a push and pull here. This is a unilateral decision. And also, it's unilateral because they said nothing about fucking talking to the players. There wasn't, well, we got together with a council of 10 players, one representative from each team, and came to this agreement. That didn't fucking happen. This was just decided and then announced. So it's probably not great for the players. Now, I agree with you, Thorin. From a viewer perspective or from the league's perspective, this is fucking awesome. Like, I think it probably will accomplish some of the goals, such as making the league more competitive, creating real fan bases around legacy players on certain teams. It will also help the teams be able to build rosters because now they will have known pieces that they will have for an extended period of time, or at least that they can make, they're guaranteed that they can make the most competitive offer and then lock that player down before they ever hit free agency. And these are all important to the success and health of the franchises and the success and health of the league. But the issue is that there isn't any give to the players here, is just take from the league. And that is fucked up. And it is just straight up illegal in the United States for these reasons. But antitrust law is very weak in Korea. As far as I know, the professional sports athletes do not have these unions either. It's going to be,
when they last time Faker like re-upped his contract and did a deal with it, what was the like rough number they said? They said he was in like tens of millions of dollars or something now, wasn't he? Wasn't it like a $20 million contract or something?
Yeah, something like that over 2 years.
Because basically the point to make is this, right? This is where you have to understand again, Korea is not the United States of America. And more importantly, it never will be. As in, you are not going to turn the fucking steamboat of their cultural values for a fucking video game. So as you might see by the way that a lot of the messaging is written down here, the implication, and this is sort of how they think, I'm afraid, the implication is that they do sort of feel like they, the team that brought you up, own that player. They sort of, here's what they essentially feel like. They feel like if I brought you into my team and then for a few years I coached you and you became a good player, why do you then just get to go and someone else benefits from you being a good player? I made you. Like, I made you the player you are. So I should somehow profit from your career for the rest of it, right? The point is, in the West, that would be considered like exploitative, wouldn't it? Like, no one would agree with that. But that's how people think even there. Like, if people don't understand, the work culture over there is not, they're not explicitly mandating this. I'll give you an example. I used to have a Korean girlfriend, right, who used to keep working until like 11 at night. And she would always be getting me to meet her, Monty, at like 1 a.m. in like Hongdae. And I'd be like, why don't we just meet at 9 or something? She'd be like, I had to work overtime again. And I was like, all right, at least you get paid in that. She's like, oh no, it wasn't like overtime, like you get paid. I just had to work more hours. And I was like, why'd you do it then? Just tell him you'll do the work tomorrow. And she was like, well, the boss just told me I had to do my work. And I was like, just tell him you'll do it tomorrow. And what she told me was this, Monty, was like, it's not that like it's literal like overtime and I have to do it. It's like, he's just not going to hire me next time for that gig, or I'm not getting a promotion, am I? Because the other guy's going to do in the office, he'll do the overtime. So essentially, it's just baked into their system. This is what you do. You have to give everything for the org that owns you. They sort of are your fucking master in some fucked up Confucian sense. And you're not just going to leave and go. You're definitely not going to do it in like the Western American sense. Because I'd even say this. If anyone thinks you're going to integrate that stuff from the West, Kesper just looks at the NBA, mate, and they see shit like those superstar players just playing God with all those $100 million rosters. Like all those fuckers from the Thunder years ago have just torn all these fans. They look at that and they go, let's never implement that. They go, that's terrible, that. Like, it's those idiots in the West go, it's brilliant, no, it's awesome, all the money. Like, they look at that and they go, let's never go down that route. Like, that's why you're going to, the joke is, Riot would have to force them to implement some of these things. I even think they're only doing some of this because it's more of like a global game. They have to sort of like pretend like they're doing this to benefit the player. I don't think they really believe it does. And then the one last thing I would say is this. The reason I asked about the Faker example is this. It's because in the West, just like Doublelift does directly, publicly battle for PR purposes, entities he wants to get better deals from. If this was the West, honest, Faker would be the one talking about this. Because guess what? Faker's the one who never would be able to get those tens of millions of dollars. If this system had existed in 2013, I can't see any world, Monty, where Faker could be on $20 million a year. Like, think of what he would have started with. Spoiler, in 2013, when he started, I would guess he probably made like $20,000 a year. So let's say he starts with 20K a year. You give him those 2-year deal, right? So he gets to 2 years. Let's give him a 20% increase year on year. That means by like year four or something, Monty, he's only up to something ridiculous, like what, 40K or something. Like, where is he at like now? And even if he does another deal, because you've incentivized that it costs more to get him to another team, probably goes to T1 again. The joke is at the end, even if he was on $5 million, that would be the greatest player of all time with all his accomplishments. Only gets to 5. He'd never be at what he's at now, guys. So the sad thing is, this is almost inarguably bad for players as a general, like, broad stroke across the industry. There might be rare cases, like we say, where it's not fucked up or it just actually mandates things in an easier fashion. But the sort of the implications and the sort of, like, I think the influence this will have on the industry, I think for players specifically, it's going to be rough. I think this will be really rough, mate.
Yeah, and as we said, with the NBA with supermax contracts or the NFL with franchise tags, you actually end up paying more to keep these players on your rosters, but you just have the opportunity to lock them down, right?
At least franchise tag. That. We should talk about that because here's the thing people might not know. In fact, I'll give you an example. Dude, there was a podcast the other day I watched that was talking about this. There was a podcast. Have you ever watched that one, I Am Athlete? The one where it stars like Brandon Marshall and Ocho Cinco. It's a pretty good podcast, actually. And they always bring on NFL players, right? And they had Asante Samuels, that guy who used to be on the Patriots in the 2000s. And when this guy comes on, dude, he actually tells an anecdote about how he was like almost in tears when Bill Belichick called him and said, I'm going to franchise you. Because if you don't know, fans, even though, again, this is the perfect example. Because when they presented the franchise tag, they presented it like it was going to be good for the player and you'll get more stuff. And then in the end, half the time, it was motherfuckers like Devontae Adams, like, please do not franchise me. Please do not. Because it only fucks you as a player. It actually can be used to fuck you as a player, believe it or not.
I mean, basically, you get a 1-year deal and you get paid more than you might. But obviously, if you get injured in that year and your career ends, then you have no contract and you just get fucked. So,
or the team you would have gone to doesn't want you after that year. You know, a bunch of angles,
the nice thing about franchising, if you get franchise tag like multiple years in a row, it just like skyrockets your money. But because it's basically a favorable contract to keep you on the team where you get paid more than you would otherwise. But the risk is that if you get injured or the team doesn't want you or the market is different or your performance goes down for any reason, you don't have the opportunity to sign like a 5-year deal or something of the sort. So I think there are certain advantages to the franchise tag. More immediate money is obviously one of them. But what this does is that it's kind of, it doesn't lock them in the same way. Obviously, like the player, as far as we know, is still free to enter free agency and just decline all offers and then see what happens. But honestly, like that's probably going to be bad for you because other players will be locked in by that time. And unless you've made like an under the table deal to go, like there's a possibility, let's say, 2 players both are in this like franchise tag, right? But they want to play together. So one of those players is going to have to like take the risk of going into free agency in order to get the contract with the team with the other franchise player. And so there's an inherent risk to the players. And so if there's a risk,
like you're saying, it basically strips away player agency. You can't do like the KT super team they did a few years ago. You'd never be able to get that made.
Yeah. And so if you do this, like there has to be an advantage to signing the contract early. And the advantage should be more money or guaranteed money. It can't be, you're going to get paid less money because now we're instituting these transfer fees, which are going to try and like hamstring the budget of these other teams, which then allows us to bid under the market price because these other teams are paying 20%, 30%, whatever percent it is. You'll notice they don't tell you what the percents are. What's the percent to go to a Korean team? What's the percent to go to a foreign team? What is the fee? No mention of the fee, of course. No mention of the fee. Like a pretty crucial detail. It's
also sucks because think about this, right? Bearing in mind, it means if you want to sign someone to the LCS who's Korean, you are going to pay over the odds. And in this case, they might even be incentivized to stay in their Korean team. This is where fans never like run through history again. Think of that means no core JJ. Forget that. That's gone. That's off the table immediately. Then, all those years where you've heard those baller stories and it hadn't happened yet, but it was going to happen eventually. Those stories how Jack and fucking Steve from Team Liquid have constantly made those offers to Faker Faker, Chovy, like go down the list, like the best players ever, basically, like because they know if they ever sign one of these players, like team doesn't even have to be good. If Faker comes to Team Liquid for 1 year, you can imagine what Steve could do without his fucking marketing budget and all the story.
Yeah.
Put it this way, those players are never coming to the West now. Like, why would they? You'd have to pay up for the odds for them.
I mean, there are several outcomes for this, which we have to discuss a little bit before we bring Dhokla on, which is one of them is that Korean players simply won't be rookies on Korean teams. They may prioritize going to China or going to the West in order to get
initially trapped into this sort of a system.
Yeah, don't get trapped into the system, because the way to subvert the rookie contract clause, because unfortunately the problem with it as it's worded is that basically, as soon as they get 1 year of experience in a foreign League of Legends professional league, they no longer qualify for these rookie contracts and they could just get paid, right? So we may see young Korean players actually just go straight to China or go straight to NA and EU to try and play a full year in those leagues in order to avoid being trapped in these contracts. That's certainly on the table. Probably isn't going to be an attractive option. But again, the LCK knows that most of these players are going to be 17 years old when they make this decision. And obviously, if you're 17-year-old, most families, their parents are not going to want them to go to Europe or North America or China when they're 17. So LCK knows that they have certain systemic advantages in this scenario to trap players. So it's either you send a 17-year-old to live in a team environment in a foreign country where they probably won't speak the language, which a lot of parents just aren't going to want to do that. And a lot of kids aren't going to want to do that. So it's almost like forcing these minors into situations that they're probably not ready for, or you get trapped in the system. Like, it's a bad choice. So that's a bummer. Or maybe players just delay starting their rookie seasons till they can go to the West. Or go to China, right? These are other opportunities here that potentially might happen.
That you see, by the way, why I always say one of the biggest what ifs ever in esports history for me is if Richard Lewis ever really cared about a game that had Koreans in it. Because, mate, imagine if he'd actually been fucking knee deep in Korean esports industry stuff for the last 10 years, bringing all this shit out. Be fucking unreal, wouldn't it? Because the joke is, he would nail all this if it was his written article, isn't it? He'd have all this context written in as he explained it to you. So sadly, it's the one area he only cared about, like CS:GO and gives that, didn't he? So he never really gave a fuck about Koreans, unfortunately.
Yeah,
he'd also probably been killed, though, I will say. So I think that's well. Just realistically, eventually.
I think the other question too about this is if it's even going to stand. Like, I'm kind of in shock that this was approved by Riot headquarters or by Tencent, because obviously this is really going to hurt the Chinese teams in particular.
I know what you mean, but here's the problem, Monty. I have to say, the first thing I think of when I see this is, when's the LPL version come out? You know what I mean? Like, that is one of the first things, because they have their own version. People don't. They're called Ace, if you know, like the Chinese one. Because I remember it was the Chinese CS:GO. Yeah, it's their version of Kaspersky. Yeah. So the joke is, like, I imagine that knock-on will be. That's why, Monty, because the joke will be Tencent themselves will realize, well, actually, our Chinese partners may also like a system like this, and they'll just implement it there as well. And spoiler, like I said, anyone who thinks, like, if you still believe that, like, Riot is like they're the big daddy, like, they have no jurisdiction on this. They're not going to be saying shit to any of these. I imagine this all just happens, mate. I don't think there's any pushback, in my opinion. It'll just come to pass.
I mean, I do think it's, again, Riot, the king of ethical companies, by the way, guys. You know, they'll have Pride Month for you, but then they'll institute policies that are illegal in some of the countries that they operate in order to trap the players. You know, Riot's great, the most player-focused company in the world, except when it comes to limiting the options and salaries of our professional players arbitrarily, right? That's not player-focused. Like, that's a bunch of bullshit. But I don't know if Riot is going to allow this to pass. I don't know if this was approved by Riot HQ. It's certainly a bad look for Riot HQ, because regardless of whether it is legal in Korea, it's unethical. This is unethical to do to the players, straight up. So are they going to stand for this? Who's gonna step up and actually defend the players in this circumstance?
Even if it turned out it was illegal, like, This is never going to court, if I had to guess. Like, there's another thing people don't understand about the Korean system. Like, good luck being the player who like tries to be like fucking break the big teams and go to court over your contract. Like, you just be blacklisted forever, mate. You just be done. Like, wouldn't it be worth your time? Like, that case is never happening. The only person who could do it would be like a faker type character. You'd have to be willing to go to a massive scale with millions of dollars. Like, they're not gonna like the difference is in LA when we talk about these stories, like the Tfue story, that might actually go to court as it almost did. Like, and get fully swing through this in Korea. This isn't even gonna. This is gonna be a fucking afterthought, mate. It'll happen or it won't. And like I say, to me, it's not very shocking because to me, it's entirely. It's good. They're totally on brand for Korean esports. This is exactly. What
I'm not
exactly.
surprised they're trying to do this. I'm surprised that when it is supposedly Riot HQ and Tencent it directly involved, that they would allow the Korean League to do this.
This is where we fucked up. Like, look, we're not far away. I know I've said in the past, like, we would do this for LCS Summer or whatever, so we still might do it, but we're not far away from being able to do this. This just like desperately needs a skit though, Monty, because obviously the joke would be, the skit premise would be this: we'd constantly be introducing features which obviously fuck the player, but we'd spin them that it's like going to help the player. You know, like, it'd be great because essentially you'd sell stuff like, you know, why have all those pesky thoughts season after season? Where could I go? Who could I play with? Is just the right team for me? With the new, you know, Kesper integrity test system, you will get 5 years locked into one. You know, like a whole thing like that. Like, you could do a whole thing. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it? I know this. There's so much legs for things we could do that are fucking the player.
You could live in this prison cell. There's even a bucket to shit on the floor. Yeah. But again, like this is likely going to be, it depends on the details, but as I understand it, those details are going to be released relatively soon. This could turn into a Four Horsemen episode once we know everything about this, where we can, I mean, obviously Barry would be a great guest considering he's an agent and a lawyer and bilingual in Korean. Would be probably pretty amazing to discuss all of these topics with, but we'll see where it goes. I'm hopeful that the details will be favorable to the players, but I don't anticipate that they will be, is basically it. Look, guys, I know you probably wanted us to talk about LEC a little bit. We'll probably do some in the questions afterwards. It wasn't as crazy of an LEC week this past week. LCK also wasn't super incredible or anything like that. And this coming up, I think, really deserved a long time of discussion because no one else is going to give you this information, guys. No one else is going to talk like this. Anybody else who's involved in the LCK
say anything like this at all either. That's just off limits.
Look, yeah. Look, the way Korean journalism works is as follows, guys. It is actually, if you are in Korea and you have an article that is released and it is defamatory but entirely true, so it could be entirely accurate, you can still be sued for defamation and still lose your job and lose money. So this is how people with money and the corporations control the media in Korea, because everyone's afraid of losing their job, or the news outlets are afraid of getting sued, because it doesn't matter if it's true, you can still lose a court case for defamation. So it's really fucked up. So you're not going to see anybody in the Korean media do anything. You are not going to see anybody who requires access to the Korean players, such as interviewers or any of those journalists doing anything. You are not going to see the LCK commentators saying anything about this. We are the only people who are going to discuss this.
Dude, I think there's a more egregious group that's going to be silent. All those stupid woke people will say nothing at all while they literally sit back and go, what's that? Thousands of Asian people I don't know will be exploited. Well, what's that? Wait, oh, sorry, someone's done a tweet. Hey, guys, get the pitchforks. Woo, woo, woo. There's a tweet. There's a tweet, everyone. But they'll never fucking say a word about this. And by the way, a spoiler, because why would they put their career on the line? Why would they risk not getting hired to Worlds? Why would they risk a team blacklisting them? Why would they list a player? Not exactly. There's actually costs to having principles, you fucking losers. There's costs. Pay them if you want those principles. They're worth it. By the way, it's totally worth it. I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you a mad underrated quality in the world, Monty. Every single thing that you see in media presents it that you're a moron if you ever like turn something down, like money, for some other reason, right? Dude, it's the best thing you could ever invest in yourself with. When you actually turn down something you think is just wrong, you just have a sense that this would be morally wrong to do. It actually feels good to know I didn't take the money for it. It's fucking awesome. It's a great thing you can do for your character. It'll make you feel great. You just wake up and go, oh, that's right, I'm not a piece of shit. Brilliant. Now I'm with my life. Oh, spoiler, you can't do that, all you people in esports. You're just fucking trapped out, yeah. Exactly.
Look, we need to hold on. Don't get mad yet, because we can't get mad until we know the details. But we can be suspicious before we know the details.
Concerning is what I would say. It's just concerning.
It's extremely concerning.
Yes. Exactly.
Because
it's a worrying trend. There we go. To reclaim that classic meme. It's a worrying trend, isn't it? You know, I'm not saying that you won't do a fucking pentakill on Darius at Worlds, but it's a worrying trend that he's stuck in Diamond too, isn't it? Oh, balls. Shout out, Jack. Really, really worrying trend. Once we get all the details, if it is indeed as bad as it appears to be on its surface due to the omission of information that they have very purposefully done in the announcement of this in the short form, if it is bad, we'll four horseman this, because it actually does need to happen, and somebody needs to fucking say something about this, because again, nobody else will. That's going to do it, guys. We're gonna get on Dhokla now and talk about LCS. We'll have a good time with him. Obviously, up and coming team, fresh off the Team Liquid win. This segment has been sponsored by esportsbet.io. Play along in the World's Prediction Series. You win up to $300,000. We did real well this week. Watch Competitive Edge on this channel if you're interested. We kind of shadowbox the matchups. We're doing very well if you guys want to follow along with our predictions on that show. And along with our watch parties as well for the live games on LCS and LEC every week. So we're going to take a quick break, and we get back. We'll have Dhokla. Right, we're back. We've got our guest on this non-sponsored segment, and the guest is Dhokla from CLG. And here's the thing, Dhokla. This is how fast fortunes turn around in the LCS. It was only something like, what wasn't it only just over a year ago that Reggie made that mad tweet towards Vulcan where he implied that if whatever, everyone's going to work in McDonald's who's a native player. Then he had the infamous thing where he was like, if TSM's ever like CLG, I'll sell my whole life and everything, all my organs. I wish he'd said his organ. They're not fuck all, by the way, your organs, Rachel. Your brain especially worth absolutely nothing. But obviously now the joke is CLG's actually way better than TSM and has been for all these splits. And actually, it's not even a meme anymore, mate. When my mate Finn, who's now an XL, was on your team, he tagged his whole career. Everyone was like, he's done, it's over. They're actually back. CLG is back. As Monty pointed out, win over TL. That's not chopped liver. It's nothing to turn your nose up at. Although definitely don't turn your nose up at chopped liver. It's the most nutrient dense food in the world. So
liver
let's get into it.
Just soak it in milk first, so it's not too bitter. But yeah, I think this has been surprising for many people, considering
Renaissance. It's the CLG Renaissance.
Well, I'm happy. I always, obviously, I was a part of CLG, and I've always really loved the org. So it makes me pleased.
Fucking all out with how they treated you, but all right, I guess you might just have rose-colored glasses looking all those years back. By the way, I've got a quick anecdote actually, because I don't know if I ever told this on this show, so I'll quickly tell it because people will appreciate it. Right, years and years ago, people might even know there was once a tweet like this in 2015. One time, Doublelift just did a weird tweet where he was like, at Thorin, I would like to add you on Skype and become friends with you, or some weird fucking line like that. So I added him, right, and I was chatting with him. And what happened was, because it's just who I am, Monty, within the convo, he just brought up at some point, when you were coaching CLG or something, but he did it in a sort of joking manner, me when Monty was our coach. And I was like, oh, you mean when you just pretended that he was a fake coach and let him literally just get completely lied about and completely essentially defamed by your rivals? You just let all that happen. You sat back, and then I even told him, and I even heard it was a player who told him. So being as you're the fucking big mouth Doublelift, I bet you were probably one of the guys who said something, right? And all you need to know about Doublelift is this, right? He actually took it really to heart though. He was sort of oh yeah, I didn't really think about it though at the time, to say anything publicly. I thought everyone just assumed it was false because Reggie said it. And I was like, you think everyone just assumes everything Reginald said was false? Obviously now they would. This was 10 years ago when everyone used to think he must be saying the truth. So all you need to know is this, Money. This is the punchline to the story. If you go back, there'll be a tweet, you'll find this. There is a tweet where Doublelift actually around this time, right after I've just berated him, just goes on Twitter. He obviously thought better of it. And he's done a tweet where he did some tweet I wish I'd stood up for Monty when he'd been there.
Oh, that's nice.
But all you need to know is this. One, that really happened because I berated him. But here's the kicker, because the kicker is the funniest part of all. Later, a different source told me, like, oh, I don't think it actually was Doublelift, though. I think it was like Dexter or something. So it wasn't even Doublelift who actually did it, Monty. But he's got such a bad memory that he forgot and just assumed, yeah, just how xMatty would do, and just apologizes for he didn't even do. That's the most perfect Doublelift story of all time, right there. It's amazing, isn't it? I know, like. Why are you apologizing for stuff you didn't even do?
Too funny. So yeah, I mean this year obviously is a lot different for CLG. You are coming onto this team as, I mean, you've been around for a very long time. In various, you've played in the LCS previously at different points in time. So considering that you are now what, on your 7th, 8th year of your career?
I don't think I play that much. I think I'm on my 4th year.
I mean, as an amateur player too.
I guess if you count that, yeah. Okay.
I mean,
I don't know if it's 7, but it's definitely probably more than 5. But yeah,
it's a long time. Why is it that all of a sudden you got this opportunity, and how do you feel about your current level of skill? Because I think you've impressed people as a. I mean, you're not a new LCS player, but in this stint as an LCS player.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely, when I first came into LCS, I definitely don't think I was prepared to play in LCS at the time. I think I was just playing like solo queue, and I was just a kid, really. Like looking back at it now, I didn't really have like the confidence I would need to like perform at the best at like a top level. And I still had a lot to learn throughout the game, so I feel like just developing in that regard, I've learned so much more compared to like, or that brought me to where I am now. So that's just allowed me to play a lot better currently than I have like previously on the teams I've been with before.
We had a watch party yesterday that had Zabatine on, who obviously was your former coach when you were in Optic, right? The Optic period seems like a weird period, because if people don't know, that was actually a team where they did do like a true 10-man lineup. Like they were taking people from like Academy, the LCK, and people were just going back and forth between it. What was that area like? Because I noticed you were like bouncing in and out depending on when it was in the split, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was somewhat of a 10-man lineup. I would say it was more like 7 or 8 generally, but honestly, during that time, I don't think I was like, I didn't really have that real confidence or like confidence in my play that I would really need to like be at a top level. I think when I like in my mind, like when I was just playing LCS and on Optic, I was just like there. I didn't really have like a goal in mind of what I really wanted to do or achieve. I was just like playing, happy I was given the opportunity to play in LCS, and that was just about it. I don't really have aspirations higher than that. So
what's the problem, mate? Why aren't you more confident in yourself? Why are you like, nah,
I don't know. It's just part of growing up, I guess.
People, the assumption normally of Americans is they're supposed to be like overly arrogant, like, oh, probably beat Faker off. You're supposed to be like JoJo, mate. Why are you all like fucking, I don't know if you're good, and
Yeah, I mean, it's just how I grew up, I guess. There's, I mean, yeah, it's probably just a product of like how I grew up.
Taught to be humble.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, yeah, I mean, now it's just like, I've been through LCS, been in Academy, been in Amateur as well. Like going back into LCS now, it's like I have nothing to lose really. So
I like the way you said like you've been in Vietnam. Like I've done 3 tours of Vietnam. I was in fucking Academy. You nearly adopted Academy. I was born exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, now it's like I'm very confident in what I'm able to do. I think I'm definitely like a top player, at least for top lane in the league. So now whenever I play on stage, like I'm just very confident and actually just winning the game and getting like wins against EG, against TL. It's just just proves that point, like we can compete. And my goal personally in this play is to make it to Worlds, and I mean, so that's the bar I set for myself. And
well, now we know you are confident. Finally, the confidence kicks in.
Yeah.
Right, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
And then
I like it.
I think coaching actually has to do is a big part of like inspiring confidence within players. So I think on previous teams I've been on, it's like a personal coach in that regard, or like someone just look over like ask you how you're doing would have been like really helpful in my early career, but I'm good now. But like I think that's something that can be improved within a lot of players, because I feel like they definitely miss out on that regard of just like getting help in terms of like what they actually need to improve on, instead of just like macro bullshit gameplay focused stuff, because I feel like that's not really what's going to make you better. It's just the individual stuff that you really need to work on.
when it comes to CLG, like there has been a lot of turnover in the past couple of years, and in terms of like the GM and management, and you guys have quite a few coaches at the current point in time. So when you talk about what's helping you from an organizational perspective, can
Well,
you
the
just talk-
CLG icon does look a little bit like some sort of like a recycling icon. It does look like sort of like, just
I think
saying.
it looks like a bad tribal tattoo, but
Oh, it does. It looks like something that the guy who's on the undercard in the UFC who gets
Yes.
knocked the fuck out, he has that on his back. Not the champion, like they'd have a classy tattoo. Yeah, that just looks like the trash one, doesn't it? I know, yeah.
Yeah, the graphic design in early League of Legends was not strong.
Sure.
Couldn't hire the best at the time. But what is the current structure of CLG? Because I think a lot of fans probably don't know exactly how all of the coaches. Like you have a lot of coaches, right? And like ThinkCard is
They
your
have all
head coach
positional
right
coaches,
now.
right? Don't
Yeah,
you?
you have a bunch of positional coaches.
Yeah, I think we have 7 coaches in total, including Academy. So it's definitely a lot, like compared to like pretty much any other team, right? So like the structure of the team is like our main coaches will lead the review and stuff, and then after review, we'll just have like personal one-on-one with everyone. So I mean, I think it's a pretty good system for now. And one thing I will say about the CLG turnover is that like I think this year it's like a completely different CLG compared to the past, because like everyone just got fired from like the last iteration, right? So there's like no remnants of like that CLG from the past. So when I joined CLG, I initially just viewed it as like, okay, I'm just joining a completely new team. It's not like what it was last year, where it's just like 9th, 10th, like really bad, no like goal in mind of what they wanted to do. Just so I just viewed it as going into like a brand new team, and it definitely is very welcoming. Like everyone's motivated. It's not like what I thought of CLG in the past when I was like playing against them or something like that. So definitely really nice to be here.
Did you have any reluctance based on like, because it's pretty shocking?
That's the way he
last
said
year.
that. Like, you have to understand, fans. I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to censor myself. So all I'm going to say is, what I love about that is the way he was sort of like, you know, when I wasn't on CLG, obviously I used to think that what a bunch of fucking losers who never played.
Yeah.
But now I joined the team, though. It's actually quite cool. You know, like they're welcoming. They have salaries.
They did. I mean,
games, I think.
obviously, like the PR blunders from last year,
of course.
like the horrible like Bud Light like benching incident, and you know many of these people are no longer with the organization.
In their PR was the treatment of CLG, Joe. Exactly.
Mistakes were made. You know, mistakes were made.
Exactly.
And so, there has been a giant refresh. So I see where you're coming from with that. Have you, in terms of the people who have stayed, have you sensed that there's been a big change in how things were run? Or when you were thinking about coming into the team, what did they tell you about what changes were going to occur that really sold you on joining the roster?
Well, I don't think anyone from like the previous iteration of CLG stayed. There was a new GM, new like just the whole like League of Legends division was completely new. So then when I joined them, I was like, I just gave them my goal. Like I signed on an academy, and then my goal in my head was like make it to LCS. I think obviously that's just my goal, and I was able to do that. So I was really like, this is the place I wanted to be, where I think I would get the best chance to do that compared to like the other teams that were interested in me at the time. So glad I took this opportunity, because I was debating within like joining other teams. So really glad this one paid off.
I've got a quick question before we go into like this split and the CLG, just because I figure it's the summer now. People can barely remember what the last Cloud9 lineup was anyway, mate. The statute of limitations has passed on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask you this question. Last split, right? Will you actually ever see it? Like, what was the Cloud9 team the last split? Behind the scenes, was there among players? Was everyone obsessed with the drama in the same way as public? Like, was there a sense of like, oh, it's all blowing up, or like, oh my god, the Summit guys out? Was there any of that jazz behind the scenes for the pro players? Did you guys follow it like we did with Popcorn, or was it all big story? What was it?
Well, during the split, I didn't really follow along with it, but there was like a party, not a party, but like a cookout that I went to, and then stuff was being said behind the scenes of what happened within C9, and it was definitely juicy for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So people in the mix knew what was going on behind the scenes, and I mean, but like the rest of the league, I guess, in terms of that, didn't really keep up with it. But after like the split ended, after like they dropped out of playoffs, like everyone kind of knew what was going on. So then I wasn't really surprised when I saw the change of Summit.
Fair
So
enough.
yeah.
I mean, I knew it. I knew it was happening when it was happening.
What I can't believe about that is the way the broadcast has to just pretend like he's memory hold like a fucking character in Back to the Future 1 in a photo. Like, oh, here we are for the summer split, and it's Fudge in the top lane for Clan. Like, what? Bro, that was the MVP. He's just like, he's not even on the continent anymore. We're not going to talk about this. Like, what? How is that not the biggest storyline of all time? Like, what the fuck? Like, dude, he was literally the MVP until he so hard entered playoffs. They just like ejected him to another continent. Like, what are we not talking about this? It's a pretty big storyline, guys. What the fuck?
yeah, that is. It is really shocking, and obviously, probably worth discussion. Massive scandal, as it were. Really, no reporting around what actually happened in that situation either. It turns out
if you're an NA player who's on the rise, right, you're supposed to be like, oh, I'm going to work hard and be diligent. I want to get to the top of the field. I want to be the best in LCS. Then you look around in LCS all these years. It's like fucking Summit and Hooney are just like, lol, I'm actually going to just run it down for no reason. I'm getting millions. And then you're like, can I play? Can I just play? I'm practicing everything.
That was really my mindset in spring because, I think I was playing like insane in spring and I just needed an opportunity to play. So then every time I was watching LCS, I'm like, these players are just so bad. I just needed an opportunity to prove myself.
There you go.
And I mean, that was my mindset at the time. And I do not think like a lot of players in top lane especially are good. I feel like they're just doing their own thing. I don't know what they're really doing. So glad I'm having the opportunity. I don't know. Yeah. So then I think like teams also don't know what they're doing. Like when they're signing these players, I really do think like they don't know what they're getting in terms of like what they want from a player or something. Because I feel like when they're signing these new players, like I'm playing against them all the time, so I know like actually like what their strengths and weaknesses are. But I feel like the orgs who pick these players up do not know at all like what they're gonna get from these players. So it's really shocking when I see like the same players being kept on rosters or stuff like that.
It is where Monty was destined to be a caster in some ways, because I would definitely have done some sort of sadist wordplay. I would have done a joke, and here's the premise, Monty. It would be about something like, I would make a joke that at some point in a game when FlyQuest played, I'd be like, of course, the problem there was they needed the flat head. And you'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, their problem, Monty, was they attempted to fix this situation with Philip's head, didn't they? I'd have a whole thing that'd work in like that. It'd be whack. I'd work in, and I'd deliver it like it was a real joke as well, like that. Like, even though it's absolute shite, I don't care. Something to that one.
Still
I also do think top lane's a bit weak in LCS.
So obviously, because you believe that many of these players are unworthy compared to you being in the LCS, we obviously have to do a top laner power ranking by Dhokla right now. That we get the hot take and we know your opinion. Right.
I did this on stream a couple days ago. I think.
Excellent. You already have it. You already have it worked out.
Give us the gist.
Okay. I think I put. Who did I put first? I think I put Impact first, Bwipo second, me third, Someday / Fudge fourth, fifth, and then sixth was Philip, seventh was Licorice, 8, 9 was Revenge, or 8 was Revenge, 9, 10 was Soul and Gamsu.
I'm surprised you have Revenge lower than Philip.
I do think Philip actually improved a lot compared to like when I play against him. So when I play against him in Academy, like I would just trash him like every single game, any matchup. But now he's like actually playing. He's improved a lot. I don't know what like I would credit that to, but he's definitely leveled up a lot. So I gotta give credit where credit's due.
Okay. See, my problem, I've realised I've taken the wrong tack on you here overall, because when I first heard you talk, I thought you were a bit mild-mannered. It's not. It's just that you don't like put a lot of emotion into what you say. So actually, sometimes you are. When I just tune into what you're saying, I'm like, that's actually wild, because it's almost like you're like, yeah, actually, Monty, I did used to think he was subhuman trash, but I used to dunk on him every single game. But now he has stuff. Because he says it in such an even manner, you don't sort of like react to it. You're like, oh, okay. Wait a minute, what did he say? Okay. Pretty good. Okay.
He's just very dry. You know, he doesn't think the players deserve to be in the LCS.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's just how it is. Straight up facts.
I mean, I'm with you, but you know, I'm with you.
I mean, that's what I appreciate about your attitude too, Dhokla. Is like at least you bring some of the spice, and you haven't been afraid to make bold opinions. And I think it's really valuable to the LCS to have outspoken players who are not cowed by the fans, or you just have to ignore it and just let it wash over you like water off a duck's back, right? Because they're idiots, and you want to have fun and talk some trash.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun. I mean, it's just competition, you know. It's just it's just fun to me. So yeah.
I've got a question for you. Like, it's slightly like hard, but it's got a serious element behind it, right? In your particular case, I imagine you must be facing the problem a lot of people in LCS have, which is I always think what sucks about Reddit narratives is a lot of them, if you notice, become static. Like if someone's an amazing, like I'll give you the obvious example. Like I personally think Bjergsen was whack last split, but you saw everyone still voted him like first all pro mid because he's Bjergsen, right? It's Bjergsen, of course. In the same way, I get the feeling you get the opposite of that dude, which is everyone's going to go, well, I saw you like 5 years ago on that team and you sucked. So they're just going to assume you suck now, right? Like the problem is, even though, like you say, you went into academy and proved yourself, they don't watch academy, do they? So they're just going to think you're the same. In fact, I bet they even think like, why are they getting this guy? Didn't we try years ago? Like they won't believe you've developed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's really where a sense of confidence came from, because I would hear these outside narratives. So then it'd be like an internal battle against myself of, how good am I compared to like the public perception of what I am. So now I just don't give a fuck. So like I just know I'm good, and then like every time I just get confidence from playing against these players and just like proving myself every game of just what I'm capable of. So it's really just me versus like myself at this point. So as long as I just improve, because I think the bar is like honestly, when I compare myself, I try to like look at like LCK like level players, like that's the bar that I want to really be at. And then and it's just like okay, like but the bar itself is definitely at LCK level players, like top laners like Zeus. I think he's by far the best top laner in the world right now. So that's really what I'm striving to be. So then when I compare myself to like NA players, like I don't really care about that too much. I just want to be the best I can be.
When you look at a player like Zeus, what are your big takeaways like that you think you learn from him specifically? Because I'm curious where you think he has areas of his game that you've drawn from and improved from yourself.
Yeah, every time like so he streams quite often, I'd say, for like a LCK player in terms of that, because I think just how T1 operates. So like his spacing in lane is extremely good. Like just I think it's like best of any top laner, just is spacing in terms of like between cooldowns and trading autos. So there's just a lot to learn from that, because he keeps track of like every cooldown like extremely well. So his trade patterns are like almost perfect all the time, and he's not really giving up space when he needs to. So yeah, every time I watch his VODs, there's a lot to take in from every time. So yeah, I really just enjoy watching him and learning from him.
Are there any specific champion tricks or like matchups that you think you've drawn from in him, like a specific skill you think you've learned, or something that surprised you?
Yeah, his Jace is really, really good in terms of spacing, and especially in like melee matchups as well. So just tethering between the opponents of like how like he gets autos off, or like positions for like EQs in lane, and just everything in between. Just all the micro details really add up and just make it where he just gets like a substantial lead in lane. So that's what I'm trying to emulate. Obviously, gonna need to put in a lot of work to get to that level.
Have you managed to escape the event horizon of NAJs?
I think so. I think I'm definitely a very good Jace compared to like a lot of other players, but I think like Zeus to me is the bar of like what Jace can be.
By the way, I'll actually give you props. You are, if people don't know, despite the fact LCS historically was for top lane, had a lot of cynical drafts where it would just be fucking a million games of on into Gnar, into like all the shit champs everyone knows you have to play. You're actually playing real champions, mate. Like you actually do play fucking Jace, you even played Yorn. Like these are legit picks. You're not just spamming Gwen because it's available only. Like you're actually trying some real picks here.
Yeah, I think definitely meta in LCS is very stale. I think in LEC it's been, I think Gnar as well. So it's like a lot of Gnars across the world, really, even in LCK as well. So I think
it's mostly just Gnar GP and LCK.
Yeah, it's Gnar GP or Gwen, and then I think it's very stale. People are not willing to play counters like at all. So
you played the Fiora as well, yeah, they did that as well, of course, sure.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are, I don't know if they're just not able to, or just scared, or like their team won't let them, or what's going on behind the scenes. But I think these champs can be exploited. But I just don't really see it being played across the world. I
appreciate it. Basically, you don't have a champion pool. You have a Chad pool. You just have Jace, Fiora, and Yorn that you play. So fuck around and find out.
Yeah, I mean,
enjoy your gangplank, Bwipo. I'll be taking the fucking Yorn or whatever. Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah, I think Summit was playing early into Nar, so I mean, I appreciate him for trying. I mean, I think he lost that game, but definitely, like, I think that's like a potential matchup that could be very good.
Oh, and also props for not only playing these champions, but actually doing something on them instead of missing all the barrels on Gangplank like everyone else would do.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of people. I know that I think Gangplank's the #1 champion where people don't know the difference between I can pick it in Champ Select and I can play it.
I absolutely think so. Like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like, people pick Gangplank, they build wrong, and they miss every single barrel in team fights. All they do is really ult, and this champion is apparently strong. So, like, when I see Gangplank being played like correctly, it's like, okay, well, this guy knows how to play. And then there's like a bunch of players who just are there with GP, like lost in the fight, dropping barrels like nowhere. So, I think GP is like the most like pick that you can like see people being really good on or like really shit on.
But the problem is, if you've ever seen like the really good Asians play it, you just come to the LCS draft and you think, oh, it's going to be great. And you just get blue balled. Like, you just see all the barrel steps and hit it. And then they just like always blow up the first barrel only. Like, what is he doing? Like, they never land any of this shit. All the like juicy barrels right near all the other people. Like, you're not going to land it, are you? Never going to.
Yeah, it's like Ben, probably one of the better GPs in the world, right? And then it's like, you look at a couple of GPs in like LCS and they're not the same. So.
By the way, talk about LCS though, a player I really want to get your take on, because I actually find this is one of the most, like, I think Bwipo is a player from following in Europe and now in the LCS. He has the craziest spectrum of opinions about him, because some people do genuinely think he sucks. If they're having this whole career, some people just think he feeds, he's an idiot. Some people think he's mega. Like, where are you at on this player? Because I think he's a really complicated player. That's why I find him very interesting to watch, actually.
It's really hard for me to categorize him. I think he's extremely good, but it's like, I don't know what I would like give him a play style, because I do like in my head keep like a play style of like how this person plays, but like Bwipo I just can't really get a read on, because he'll play a variety of champs to like a very high degree, and then he's willing to play a bunch of styles. So it's like whenever I play against him, it's like I don't really know what I'm expecting, but he's just good at everything. So it's hard to get a full like an accurate read on him, but I just think he's very talented.
Obviously, that's going to draw the question of, why did you blind pick Fiora into Bwipo of all people when you knew
that... It's a Chad move. It was a Chad move.
I mean, that whole... we can get into the game you played against Team Liquid, because the whole draft was just wacky as fuck. I'm like really curious what you guys were thinking about when this draft occurred, because it was you guys blinded the Fiora for you, knowing that Bwipo is like, he loves this shit. He loves like his weird ass counter picks, and you know he can play Graves. It's been a Bwipo staple for a long time. But at the same time, they were blinding the Draven, which is just like
I don't really know.
Bad also. So when you picked the Fiora, what were you expecting Bwipo to play?
Oh, I knew he was gonna play Graves. Like we played this exact matchup in Champs Queue, so like I had a pretty good idea of like he's probably gonna favor the Graves. So like our team comp was good into Graves, like he gets really outranged. So I knew the lane phase was gonna be really rough, and I think we messed up 4-5 bans. Like we were maybe gonna go for the Ornn, and then we just pivoted at like the last second. It was a Fiora, so like we banned Mordekaiser for seemingly no reason at that point, right? So it's that was definitely a mistaken draft. And then
because Fiora is considered a Mordekaiser counter. That was the other.
There's no way he's gonna play more into Fiora, right? Like
that's why I was confused about the Mordekaiser, but I was like, excuse me.
It was definitely a mix-up. And then so I mean, then we just spawned Fiora out. Like I knew he was gonna play Graves. I knew the lane is like hard. Obviously, like I got pretty far behind. I didn't really do anything, but at the same time, even though he had like a big gold lead, like he was only able to push his advantage, because I mean my team was just head, so it's like obviously because of that, but like he was only able to like push his advantage at like the very late stages of the game, which I thought I would be like the game would be like in an okay spot for me to like actually be able to fight him, but like he got so accelerated, so obviously did not have that in mind. But I mean here, even for how fed he was, I don't think he did very much in the game. I think like if you just like what I think would have been actually good is like if he just push bot, just roam mid, ulted just for the damage chunk and then come back bot. I think that would have been a better play than he's just like walking around in between the jungle, just farming everything. But
taking your inhibitor. I mean, he played the 1v1 well. I mean, I was watching. You know, he like couldn't get your ult off on him because of his positioning, which I think was probably very annoying for you. And he did all he could. I think the fact is that you guys like completely shit on them in draft, and they really had extremely limited win conditions
We should ask
because
you about that then, because here's the thing, Dhokla. Basically, whenever a team, especially like a super team like Team Liquid have, where they spent all that money and bought all those big names, when they produce a draft like this, Dhokla, what it usually implies is like the joke would be like, "You having a problem at home, son? Like, what the fuck's going on in the scrims that produces a draft like this? Like, is Team Liquid a mess in scrims or something, mate? Are they having problems? You think?"
Well, we didn't scrim like this past couple of weeks because we were going to play against them, but I mean, I don't know what's happening. I thought like they would be a lot stronger than they are. I think when we first played them in the first round robin, like we were playing from the office because contracts had COVID. So I feel like really, if we were playing on stage, I think the energy would have been completely different for us, and it would have been much closer than what we played, like how we played. Because I don't think they necessarily played a lot better than us, and I'm glad we were able to beat them this time around and show that.
Because, like, I guess the problem here for me is that in this draft, like, what's so surprising about it is that Team Liquid still doesn't seem that they have a style that they want to play in terms of committing to who is going to be the carry. Hansama's individual performance has been quite poor as of late, and we haven't seen Bjergsen switch to playing more carry champions. He opts into the Lissandra matchup against Azir, which is obviously going to be difficult for him early. I think he did a good job in that laning phase, like not falling behind. But they also are first picking Draven, which is usually considered a counter pick to a lot of the scaling hyper carries, which then gives, Luger the opportunity to play MF into it. So it seems like they were giving away a lot of really favorable scenarios to you guys in the draft phase. And on top of that, their composition is incredibly low range between the Draven and the Graves and the Lissandra as the primary carries. And so when you have an Alistair, Azir, and Poppy and an MF ult that you can use to zone them out, as long as you guys are first on an objective, how the fuck do they ever win a team fight?
I mean, you saw it in all those like Baron fights, etc. As long as you have like Boom set up in the brush,
it was pretty much like get an insane flank on our back line, which like I think on the third dragon we really messed up of like our positioning. Like we saw a list and we still got flanked, so it was like really just I mean we figured that one out. We figured that one out right away after that. We're like, okay, let's just not die like that ever again, right? So then I mean our team comp was definitely a lot better. I don't really know what they're doing. Like when they picked Draven in draft, we were really surprised, like, wow, they're really just egoing on us like that, like completely. Just and I'm glad we were able to punish it.
Basically, if you're an NA Pro player, I'm going to give you a tip, right, that we used to say in early CSGO when the player Get Right was the best player, because he was the best at being a lurker, and he used to sneak behind the team all the time, right? You guys need to learn this rule. If you can't see Bjergsen when you are setting up for an objection, he's behind you. He is fucking behind you right now. Like, just move out of it. Because, mate, when you're watching it, it's like watching a fucking horror movie where they keep, like, separating out into the woods, like, oh, we'll meet you later back at the shot. Like, no, he's behind you and he's going to kill you. Like, that's what it looks like when he's just going around the back of that dragon pit, mate. Like, we're just waiting for him to get the gold.
We had wards on him. It was
no, you had a big ward on him.
You had a good one. Yeah, you had one.
It was really just a big blunder, like how he positioned there. So,
but I mean, in spite of the fact, like they had a lot of advantages, like they probably shouldn't have had the advantage in bot lane that they had early on either with the Draven. So you guys made some mistakes, and then they had about as good of a situation as they could have asked for. But the draft was just so terrible for them that they never, like, as soon as you guys shaped up and were actually placing down vision properly and getting to objectives first, you can see like you guys got that Baron for effectively free. I mean, you traded your inhibitor for it, but who really cares at the end of the day, because you killed them all and then just won the game. And that's about the only thing they could do was make that trade, because there was just no way they were going to win that fight in a 5v5 unless you guys made some titanic error. And with the advantage that you had and the positional advantage that you had, it was just never going to occur. And that's why I just wonder about this TL roster, because I mean, the only thing I can conclude, Dhokla, about why they would be first picking Draven is that it's the only way that they can win in scrims. Like they must believe that every other way they can play the game is less effective than that. And that's what's disturbing to me, is that they apparently don't have the confidence in Bjergsen to carry these games. So they are going to pick Lissandra and Zillion, and they are going to blind pick Draven. And they do want to have Bwipo play his weird off meta counter picks. That must be successful, or the most successful aspect of scrims, which means the team is probably not going very well overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to, because I think for them, it's like managing expectations. So like when they came in this year, like they didn't make the finals, right? They got third place, and then I think the expectations were so high that it might be getting to them. I'm just speculating, but I think
Yeah, of
for me,
course.
outside looking in, I think that's maybe a play of like what's happening, and then now they're just trying to like band-aid fix, like let's just get these wins right now, play we're winning on the most. But yeah, I don't think what their play style is good because I feel like even in game they didn't really have like a clear game plan of like
No.
they didn't look like a top team. Like when we play against
Oh.
EG, it's like okay, like
Yeah.
when we're behind, like I can't even like walk up to my tower or anything. Like I think I did like 7 times in that game. Like I just couldn't really. There was no options for me at all. It's like once I'm behind, I just don't have an avenue to come back in. So it's like when I'm playing against EG, it's like okay, well I'm behind and the game is fucking hard now. But against TM Liquid, even though my lane was going like not good, I was down like 2 plays. He got first tower. It was like I don't feel that same type of pressure that I would playing against like EG or something. So just it's like just completely different feel compared to like what the team should be on paper compared to like how they're actually playing.
Well,
By
plus
the
your
way,
team.
Monty, I even think that's like an example of a scrim trap pick. Because, like, if you're drafting Draven and you've been playing it in scrims, you're just going to go balls deep and get 1,000,000 kills in the first 10 minutes, aren't you? You're going to go for every kill. You're going to give every kill to the Draven. Like, the problem with that is, like, you're thinking about the best scrim you had on it, right? You're never going to get a game like that in LCS. Like, when the fuck do you ever see a game in pro play where the Draven just gets like 15 kills? That very rarely happens now, mate. Very rarely.
Also, in that scenario, Hansama did get trolled because Santorin took the free kill
at the beginning of the game as well.
At the beginning of the game. Like there was definitely a possibility of the Draven like snowballing crazily out of control, and they Team Liquid sabotaged that for themselves. Like there was absolutely no reason for Santorin to take that kill.
What's great is in solo queue, you would just assume that jungler was trolling, but that's actually his teammate for real. Like, I love it. I fucking love it.
But yeah, we've talked about this before, but for the expense of this Team Liquid roster, it is really unacceptable. Like if this team doesn't make Worlds, it is a financial disaster for Team Liquid and is easily the biggest underperformance in the entire history of the LCS relative to expectations.
Yeah, I think definitely like they want to come in, win the league like uncontested and just dominate or like get as far as they can at Worlds, right? So I think they're definitely falling short of that.
I mean, I think it's crazy because they at least looked like they had time to fix some of the issues, because I was willing to forgive them for the spring split because Core JJ wasn't here. They were having to play with substitutes. They had to hit the ground running in the middle of the split, and they still made third place in a shaky fashion.
And in theory, Bjergsen had been out for a year and all that jazz. Yeah, there was a bunch of numbers you could shade in a bit.
You know, they had the opportunity to go to Korea to boot camp. They looked better when they came back, and then it just seems like they regressed right back into their old patterns, because it's almost as though they have an embarrassment of riches. Like they have too much versatility, and they cannot decide how exactly they want to allocate resources and how they want to play the game. So they end up just doing kind of zany things that are not effective when it comes to creating real team compositions. It's almost like every player just has their own idea of how they want to play the game, and it doesn't work together as a cohesive whole.
Yeah, I think I would just assume like the coaching staff really just needs to like align the players on like how they're going to play. Like I think coaching staff probably needs to have like the strongest opinions in the team full of like stars somehow.
I think it's fucking
it's
hard.
Definitely a tough job. It's a fucking
with that many
job.
veterans. I mean, with that many veterans, it may be in fact impossible to tell them what to do. That's the issue with getting all these teams that have so many highly experienced and decorated championship level players on them, is that they've spent their whole career winning without listening to anybody. So why would they start listening to you now?
All we need to do is basically Dhokla just needs to privately send me whatever he needs to say publicly, and I'll spice it up and make it good. Because basically that was fiery. It was like Dhokla calls out Team Liquid coaching staff, talk to your players. You are wasting millions of dollars right now.
I was them. Like I mean, I think Whip was really flexible in his opinions. So like he'll play whatever he needs to do to like win. So I think like I mean they just need to align under a goal. Like I think that was kind of what their boot camp was, but like maybe they just need to like go back to that, like have like a little team talk. Because I think definitely
as flexible as their fans though, bending over backwards to find another excuse for why Bjergsen can play fucking like.
Yeah, I think
because he can just play like Timo, mate, and the team. It's fine, he's helping the team out with the mushrooms. Like you're just fucking unbelievable, you fans. You are just unbelievable at all. It's mental, isn't it?
Even though like they're going through some adversity. I think this could be like net overall good for them if they come out in the right way. So I think they're still definitely like a top team on paper, but I think they just need to like fix their shit and just make it work somehow. I don't know exactly how that is, but I mean, I think they definitely have the potential to make it work. I had them as my top 2 teams, but I mean, I don't think they're playing like it right now. Yeah, EG and TL. I had them as my top 2, but I mean, they're definitely not playing to that standard. So I mean, they just have to like figure this shit out. At least for me.
When it comes to CLG, I'm curious what you guys think is the key to your success, because like yourself, there are a bunch of players that have kind of been in and out of academy and the LCS over the years, have fought to maintain starting roster spots and then found yourself back in academy. What is it about this particular group of players on CLG that you think is finding success this time around, or more success than many of you have had in the past?
I would say we're very like open, and in that regard, like we're very like I don't think many people have like ego in that sense. Like I feel like I definitely don't have ego in terms of like I'm confident in my play, but it's like I'll listen to feedback and I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. But I feel like that's definitely a strength of our team. We're just like very motivated, I'd say, like just to like play. At least for me, like I'm very thankful that I have the opportunity to play in LCS and I'm able to prove myself. So to me, it's just like you know, I'm just making most of my opportunity, and I think everyone else is on that same mindset where we're just really happy to be here and we're just trying our hardest to make this work.
He means literally like he's enjoying the experience of being here. Again, fans, he's not like, I'm just happy to be here. Look, guys, I played bloody 4 splits in academy, please. Just don't, please, sir, don't send me home. Like, he doesn't mean it like that. He doesn't mean it like that, guys. He doesn't mean it like that. All I'm saying is, the joke is, we should just really, I know what we're going to do, Monty. In the future, some of the Insight will just be Monty and the guest, and then I'll do a core stream of some of the Insight.
So you're just not translating like the key segment.
Exactly. Why am I in the content? I should just be commenting on the content logically, you know, put it together.
That's like a Key and Peele segment where I just talk and you actually speak what I'm
the translation one, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Pro player translator.
But that was actually one of their best clips, that one where, do you know the one he's on about, where they had Obama's like translator and obviously he's just saying all like gangster shit or whatever. He was pretty good. That was pretty well done. Well done.
When it comes to your guys' comms in game, do you guys have a leadership structure that you're working off of, or specific shot callers?
I think contracts is definitely a vocal piece for us in the early game for sure, and I think I'm able to be a strong voice as well. It's just I need to be more consistent in that regard, because I feel like in a couple of games I'll be very vocal of what I need to like just carry the game, but then in other games I'm just quiet. So that's definitely something I'm working on for sure, to be more consistent. It's hard to have that same energy.
Dude. Here's how I know that Contracts is actually low-key 200 IQ. You ready? You're going to like this one. You can tell him this one if you want. This is how I know. Because you know how annoying it is if in the middle of a fight, idiots start attacking the fucking Wukong clone. So he's so 200 IQ, he ulted it out of the fight so he couldn't attack it. That's fucking genius. This man's a genius.
Yeah.
Nobody can mistake the target now.
There you go. That's just a freebie. It's just a freebie. Just a straight there Contracts. Right, you can catch up.
Yeah, I think Contracts definitely a vital piece for us in the early game, and then Palfox also talks a lot. He's very creative in terms of his play, and I think Luger by far is the most creative person I think I've ever played with. He just sees the game like completely differently. Like I can't explain like the type of plays he thinks. Like against our EG game, like he's behind me when we're trying to like backdoor an end. Like no one really knows what he's doing. Even us, like we're on the team, like, yo, bro, I think you should go to the Elder, bro. And then, Luger is definitely very creative in terms of like snowballing and like just seeing windows. So I think everyone has like a piece. Poom as well, like finding engages and just support shit. Just mainly finding engages. But it's just like we need to be more consistent for sure, at least for us to be like have that consistency within scrims and on stage, because it's definitely a different energy when we're playing on stage. So everyone's more active in comms, but trying to keep that same energy when we're practicing, so we can actually like go off that and improve for when we do play on stage.
When it comes to you guys, like you're still fighting for that world spot. It seems like it certainly is a possibility. The meta seems to be trending in your direction, I would say, especially considering how hard Luger has carried this team in kind of the previous iteration of the roster, and he seems very well suited to kind of playing these top lane or these AD carry hyper carries in the bot lane. Obviously was a shining part of this roster when you guys weren't doing as well as you are right now. Palafox is a pretty stable, I would say, mid laner overall, and can scale well on some of these control mages. So are you confident yourselves in the current meta?
Yeah, I'm definitely confident in pretty much every single player on our team. It's just consistency. Like we all went to Korea. I think Luger got to like top 20 in Korea. Like I think that he's insanely good mechanically. It's just he needs to be consistent because he sees plays that like are really wild sometimes, and like he'll go for them. But it's like being consistent in terms of the play. So I think we all have the talent to be like, I think talent wise we're not like behind or like too far behind of like the top teams. I think we just need to come together and play just as a team, and that's generally what's going to stop us, I think, for making worlds, at least for me. So that's just my goal.
All right, what about this then? Since he already said, Monty, that his top 2 includes TL, well, fucking hell, I can't wait for this Cloud9 conversation. And my God, what's wrong with these guys? Because I will say it hasn't looked great so far. Like, it's looked a bit fucking rubby. Like, even the game they won last night on that watch party we did, Monty, like, there's worlds they don't win that fucking game. Like, they were Golden Guardians.
We actually made a bet in the back room. We made a bet in the back room. Our coaches made a bet when they were down like 7,000 gold or 8,000 gold. We were like, I think one of our coaches said, "Yo, I think GGS is going to throw this game." And
really, fucking hell, they were right. They were right,
and they were right. And then yeah, so it was definitely.
So what do you think about this squad then? Because it's obviously not doing that great at the moment, and obviously, like one thing you have to mention is even though he's just come back, Jensen's looked fairly crap so far. I've noticed he's doing fuck all basically. What do you think? What's going on with Cloud9 then?
I'm not too sure. I think, well, first of all, I think Jensen's actually like really good. I don't know what's happening on stage, but I think. Anytime I play against him in Champs queue, I think he's like one of the best mid laners playing. So I'm not sure what's happening on stage, but I have a lot of respect for him in terms of his play. But I don't know what's happening behind the scenes because I just think like drafting wise, like they're just kind of like stuck in like limited champ pool, at least for top lane for me. So it's like I don't really view them like too highly in my opinion. I think they're definitely capable of being very good. It's just they haven't shown that yet, so I'm not gonna like put them above us.
By the way, if you were watching that game yesterday, what did you think of the beginning of that game where that fucking Bwipo's kill Fudge's kill just died? And
I was like, this guy's gonna be like 3 levels down the whole game, and I was really surprised when they threw that game because I was so like pissed. Like, how is he winning this fucking game? I was so mad. Like, if this happened to me, I'd be like 10 deaths, like getting flamed. But like, they managed to win that game, so I was really like upset. Like, holy shit, you managed to actually win that game. Like, Golden Gardens is
wild.
Just,
I mean, to be clear, Fudge didn't do anything besides ult Berserker in that game. And I felt for Jensen in that game because Jensen was effective, but he couldn't do Talia things because Fudge entered his lane, and then Pride Stalker walked bot and blew all of Berserker's summoners. So what the fuck is he supposed to do on Talia in the mid lane? Like both of his side lanes got destroyed.
He had so many kills from Golden Gardens.
Billion of them, yeah.
So I mean, he's definitely thanking them, but yeah, I mean, given the opportunity to carry, I think Jensen would do a really good job. But obviously, like that early game was a complete disaster for them. So it's really hard to look. It's really hard to do anything really besides like wait for them to int. So I mean, Golden Gardens didn't, and that's got to be like the toughest loss I think for a team to go through, losing like that. So.
The problem is on the scoreboard, right? It looks amazing for Jensen. He's like 7-0-11 on tally. You're like, oh my God, this is great. No, because the joke is this would be like praising the accuracy of a hunter if the animal kept just jumping into the barrel of the gun. Yeah. Like, all he was doing was just shooting people coming into his fucking ult when he like is ridiculous.
I like he shot the arrow, you know, it's like he's making most of what the situation is, right? But obviously it's like, I mean, you can't really blame him for just getting free kills. It's just, he's just in the right spot at the right time, I think. So, I mean, I just think the blame should just be on Golden Gardens for playing so atrociously, and then Cloud9's like, okay, well, you just somehow got to win. Good job.
Why is that their rep then? Why is the rep that they would throw the game? Because I have to say, what makes this team really weird for me, the Golden Guardians team, Dhokla, is like when I watch some of their games, there are moments in games where they look pretty good actually. Like in this one, they were looking
they looked really good in the early.
then they do just fall apart.
You could just get like a feel for the game just by watching as well. Like I think when they fought in the Rift Herald, I think that was honestly a mistake. Like they probably should have just went top because there was like 2.5 waves coming into the kill where she doesn't have flash. You could just deny her that. So I think just the decision makings from the team, like after they fought Rift, they like chased too deep.
There.
They did for sure. Yeah, exactly.
They chased way too deep. Blabber respawned from dying so early, got 2 kills. So like their decision making is so shaky, and then you could just tell from that like how the game's gonna go. Like even though they have a gold lead, like they're just making really like just terrible decisions.
The one that killed me was at one point in that game, they had a Twitch that had like 5 kills fed into it, and they never just did 5v5 team fights, dude. They just kept like having skirmishes.
Yeah, it's just like decisions like that. It was like you could just throw the game. You could just get a feeling that they just are going to throw the game. So
or you never even do picks where Twitch just appears in a side lane and just one shot somebody, right? Like I mean, there were so many problems, but to Dokla's point, like the whole hilarious sequence of events. I mean, that game was like so terrible from every angle because Cloud9 was trying to fight that Herald while like Fudge was completely chunked out in terms of HP, like under his own turret in top lane. And then at the same time, Golden Guardian 6 days on Twitch in bottom lane. He could have just stayed and gotten plates, right?
Yeah.
So he's late to the fight. Then he kills a couple people. He gets like a double kill. And then as you're saying, he just walks into the jungle, Blabber respawns and then comes and kills him. I was like, what the fuck is happening right now?
He even just burned his flash, everything.
The Herald. Like there were so many other plays. Like Cloud9 should have never been in that situation to contest.
And Golden Guardians had the scaling draft for fuck's sake. Like again, I hate to be LS, but do nothing and win. Do nothing.
Cloud9 had great scaling, but they were so far behind it didn't matter, right? And you could have just gotten the double kill. You could have stayed and gotten the plates in bot lane. You could have and then gotten the double kill, gone back and got Herald. You could have dove the Kale and kept her down.
Like there was anything different.
Just literally anything but what they did. Both teams completely fucked that up, and it was shocking. It was shocking to watch.
Oh.
As you know, by the way, that's one thing I even get I know a lot of people have commented recently, they think draft's super important, right? The problem with that, Dhokla, is if you're a layman, obviously 99% of the discussion in League of Legends pro scene from players and fans is always about draft anyway. Like they always do make it like, I picked the wrong champion on red 1, game's over. Like everyone already does that. So I'm trying to get a sense of how extreme it is, right? But I actually get the vibe. It is super impactful now. Like the 3 games we watched yesterday, mate, like you should see how important the draft was in these games. Like the losing teams actually got some good drafts and were like could have won these matches off them. Like I think it actually evened up like the player disparity. Like on paper, right? Team Liquid and Cloud9 are supposed to have way better rosters than CLG and Golden Guardians. But if you draft correctly, it's an even game. It looks like.
Yeah, I definitely think. I think in the Team Liquid game that we played, I think draft definitely helped a lot to cover, especially like my just deficit I had. So I think draft played a big part in that game. But in the Golden Guardians C9 game, I don't think draft played had like any impact at all compared to like how the game went. I think even if it's an even game, if it's like the skills are the same, I think GG has like more opportunities just because they have like better engaged in terms of just like Sejuani. So because no one's really gonna be able to stop Sedge engage. It was just like fishing with ults. So I think it was just like all the gameplay related issues that really caused GG to lose that game, and I don't really think it was up to C9 to like do anything in their power to win. I think they were just handed the win, so I wouldn't really attribute that to draft at all.
What about this then? Since he, you know what, I'm keeping track here, Monty. He doesn't rate Cloud9. He has EG at the top, and then he has like Team Liquid just by default get to for freebie default top.
Team Liquid's probably gonna have to drop him.
But here's the implication, though. The implication here is this, Dhokla. You're actually who 100 Thieves hates, mate. 100 Thieves, like they said on the broadcast, they're cheesed off, Monty, because basically, obviously, they've been in the last 2 split finals, but every split, everyone's just like, they're not actually an elite team. They're never going to win. And then they just make the finals. So they're they think we're all being too harsh on them, like we're like being too reductive and over-emphasizing their flaws. So Dhokla, why isn't 100 Thieves in your top 2, mate? What's wrong? Because they would tell you we're doing great at the moment. Everything's looking good again.
I mean, when we played 100 Thieves, I think the manner we lost was really tilted me because it's like I don't think they were better than us, but I think we just played really bad. Like in terms of a team cohesion in that game, because I had a really massive lead on Someday, and we just weren't able to like contribute that or like capitalize on that at all. So then the way we lost is like we really just did nothing and just lost. So it's really sad. At least it's a sad game for me. Of like we didn't even really like play our best, and like we just did nothing and lost. So I wouldn't really give him credit of winning the game per se. Like I think we just didn't really do anything. So I don't even think it was like a real game. So I'm just waiting for the rematch so we can like actually see like how we stack up against them, because I think we are better. So I mean that's just like my opinion, and I'm gonna stick with that.
He actually Big Lebowski'd himself. He was like, that's just like my own opinion, man, or whatever. You know, like, all right, fair enough. Fair play.
I think that's the frustrating part about 100 Thieves is they're 8-3 right now, but nobody actually really believes in them.
No one does. No one.
I mean, they beat EG, which is not
okay.
They're not going to blunder that. But
there's always some bullshit though. Like I just don't understand what EG is doing in this game. Like trying to play like. I get the theory behind the Kai'Sa Nautilus, where you're trying to like, as a Zeri counter, trying to use ults to get into the backline and assassinate the Zeri. But EG never played this pick composition properly at any point in time, and they spent the entire game just getting poked out, basically. So if you want to play Ahri, Nautilus, and Kai'Sa, great, like that's fine, but that requires a level of execution that can be kind of difficult to achieve, and especially when you fall behind with that composition, how the hell are you ever going to kill the backline, right? So,
and speaking of fucking another game where I have to just watch the mid laner, just again, same thing, Dhokla, right? Oh, Abadagi must have been a god, smurfing on him. No, he got to literally sit on his ear and have idiots try to come to the backline and then just ult them off all the time. Like, oh, this is easy. It's like, basically all fucking Abadagi did was like hold on to like his little cousin's head like that as his cousin swung away at us and couldn't reach him. Like, it was like the whole fucking game. Like, mate, if you're a mid laner, these are dream games. Like someone just inting into you when you're like an Azir and telling you, like, that's a joke. What the fuck is that?
I mean, definitely just make most of the opportunity you're given, and I think he did a good job. I think he's been playing a lot better recently than he has been.
It looks like they've nailed what to put him on now. They've sort of like got a bit cynical, but they've band-aided like the champion pools, I think, in that team.
I mean, he also was just bad. I don't know what's going on with him, but it seems like his personal motivation kind of took a dive there for a while.
You've been in too long. This is what happens.
Skill vampires came for him. He's got some skill garlic now to keep them at bay.
Yeah.
I think his personal performance has improved, because that's what we expected him to be, a top level mid laner in North America, and he certainly was not that for a lot of the year. But as much as you can criticize 100 Thieves, it's also a team that has peaked at the right times, and there's technically nothing wrong with their regular season record. If they get top 2, they get a bye in the playoffs, and then they can peak in the playoffs again. And that's what's fucking annoying about them from an analytic perspective, is like you just feel like this team shouldn't be this good the whole time, and then they just prove you wrong anyway, and you get pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, when we lost him, I was fucking pissed, but I'm just really waiting for that rematch, just so. I mean, I'm just
Actually, the rematch is on the last week of the split, so it's got 3 weeks to go.
Okay.
No, they've already played them in the second round robin. That was the last
first
match
round
they
robin.
lost.
No,
that was the first one on 4. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. They are playing the last week. Speaking of your schedule, though, you actually have had your schedule pretty front loaded. I would say, like, considering that you already got through the EGTL week at 1-1. You have a softer schedule for the most part heading into the rest of the split, which means that, feasibly, we would expect CLG to beat Golden Guardians and Dignitas next week. You obviously have very good chances against Cloud9 and FlyQuest as well. So there's a world where you're like 9-6 or 10-5 after the next 2 weeks, and are really kind of chasing kind of a 3rd, 4th place standing.
Yeah, I mean, going into split, I thought top 5 would be the goal, and then top 3 by the end of the playoffs. So I think we're on pace for that now. Obviously, we dropped the ball a bit, but definitely it's just a long season. Shit's gonna happen. It's just gonna be up and down. It's just really improving by the time playoffs comes around, because I think we're most likely gonna be in playoffs, right? It's like top 8. I don't think we're. I mean, I don't want to be like the 8 seed or anything, but obviously it's like just do best as we can and just get just improve as much as we can. And when it comes to playoffs, I just want to fucking beat 100 Thieves.
Look, man, you would be very hard pressed to be the 8th seed at this point in time. You guys would really have to fuck up. You would really have to fuck up.
Yeah.
Considering that we're talking about you're 6 and 5 and Immortals and TSM are 3 and 8. Like, I don't foresee them going on some god run and you guys losing all the rest of your matches, considering your strength of schedule. So I think your playoffs are not guaranteed, but pretty safe at this point in time. We've talked a lot about your opinions of teams that are kind of overrated. Is there a team you think is underrated now?
I think FlyQuest is actually a good team. I think they're actually cohesive and they have like pretty good players. I think they're kind of on a similar trajectory as us, I would say, where they're definitely underrated for sure. And I think they're capable of being very good. I pegged them like a bit lower than what they are now, but I think actually like they're pretty solid and they're right around that like 3rd, 4th seed like level of play. It's just consistency for them as well. It's just I think they are definitely one of the top teams in the league. I think this is like the most like close like as far as I can remember like everyone being like near the top instead of like everyone just being shit and there's only like a couple of teams at the top. So it's definitely interesting as a player for sure because there's like really just your dog shit teams and then there's like everyone like in the mix and then there's like one single top team I think right now because I think
that makes it funnier that TSM is at the bottom, man. Makes it funnier.
Yeah.
By the way, we were referencing this at the beginning of the show, but we actually want to talk about it for real because the problem we have is this basically. As you can tell, because LCS isn't like the most loved league in the world, we only really talk about the top teams, you know. Like the problem is because TSM was just in that sense irrelevant last split. Like we actually barely did flame them on this show, mate. We almost never analysed their play because last split they were obviously really horrendous. This time they've made a bunch of roster moves. They're not quite as bad. They've like won a few games, but even so, like give us some take. What is the like put it this way? You know what you said about Jensen? Like maybe in scrims on solo queue he's great.
I mean, I have strong opinions on TSM.
TSM ever good in scrims? Like, were any of these ever good?
No. I think, I mean, a couple things really like pissed me off. Like, I think, so when they let go of Huni, they had like 2 posts, like one saying he's retiring, one saying like he's going to stay on. They're evaluating his options. So I think it's miscommunication there. And then when they're talking about solo, they're like, we already thought he was like the 7th, 8th best top laner. Go in LCS, like. That's fucking bullshit. Like, just stop right there. Like,
who in the academy deserves a shot ahead of Soul?
I think like Jenkins, Darshan, Tenacity.
Look,
Bradley.
dude,
I've heard pretty high on Bradley.
Yeah, by the way, I've actually heard quite a lot of people, Dhokla, who were actually like industry people, tell me that actually Darshan's pretty good the last year or two. The problem is, he's basically got the same problem you have. People just think from years ago, he sucks now, he can never be good again.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard he's pretty good the last year or two.
Yeah, he's definitely, well, when I was in Academy last split, I think he was definitely like the 2nd best behind me in terms of like just like, there's like intent behind his decisions, like every time like he's making a decision in game. So I could like really feel that. So I was really impressed with like, how he was just like improving because I think previously when he was like a couple years ago, like he would do some really like dumb shit all the time, and then that would be like his key weakness. I think it's like, well, he's just gonna like make a really bad decision eventually, right? It's like we just wait on that, at least for me. But now I think he's doing a really good job of like making the right choices, punishing properly, like playing waves like really well. So yeah, I mean, I think people just really need to like look at the level of play, like the players playing at instead of just like what they have in their head. So I think I do a pretty good job of that myself when I'm like playing against players. So I just think people as like GMs and orgs as well really need to do that.
What do you see? Do you see an upside to Soul as a player, or was this just a factor of him already being on part of the
I really
TSM
think it's just a factor of being there.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like he's just gonna have to make the most of his opportunity. I think TSM is just like poorly constructed roster. Really, just like I don't really know.
They did get scammed, to be fair. Which
that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess, yeah. True.
I mean,
I do feel kind of bad for them, but it's also hilarious. So.
Yeah, but here's why I don't know, Monty, because all I have to remember, and if I remember this one detail, I'll never feel bad for them ever. Remember that thing I told you 2 years ago? They were offered a roster of fucking Jensen mid lane, Doublelift would stay as AD carry. They would have had an amazing team, like Licorice with the
as
top
well.
laner. They had exactly. So the fact that they said no to that team and then fucked all these rosters up is just pure hilarity. It's like they deserve that. That's some karma on the fucking market right there, boys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, so but yeah, I think their roster in terms of like players they have and what their I don't even know what their goal is to split, like just fucking survive or something. And then yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in what they will do next split because I feel like they're definitely gonna just change the roster. Like I think they do that every time, whether they win or lose, just to get better. But I think,
I mean, the angle for me, dude, is that at the end of this year, if people don't know, Speaker's contract ends.
yeah,
And
I mean,
that's the player that you got to keep.
I mean, I'm a friend of Spica, but I don't really know about the situation. But if I had to guess, like he's gone, he
I
gone.
don't know if he does. He
Like,
deserves a better
I don't
team, in
think
my
really
opinion.
like unless they pay him like insane amount and they change a lot of things at TSM. I don't think he'll stay there.
I mean, Mabel's contracted through the end of next year, which is interesting. It wasn't just a kind of shorter term deal.
Yeah,
Have
I
you?
could easily see Speaker going to a
I,
good team and be relevant, though. I could easily
yeah. I
see
mean,
that.
I'm very high on Spica. I think he's very good. I just think he's like insanely team gapped right now. So I feel really bad for him in that regard. Of like,
I mean, when they
he's
win, it's because Spica's doing a lot of things early.
yeah. I
for
mean,
the
I
most
think
part.
like even in the games, like he's like pretty much the only one being proactive and like just trying to win. So I feel like every time I watch a game, it's like I just feel really like I just really feel for him. Like man, he's just that this is not good for him. But yeah, I mean, just gotta make the most of it.
So all you need to know is this. He actually is, if you look, he is now 21 years old. Because you have to understand, he's just gone through 2 of the longest years you'll ever experience as a pro player. Like, fucking hell. It's like, that's like 10 years in article or something. Like, what? What? Like, it's like he's been in Bane's Pit or something. Like, I haven't even seen the light. What the fuck? Yeah, it's rough.
It's all right. Steve's going to come by with his checkbook soon, I'm pretty sure. And
Dude,
the
even
next
though, look,
iteration of the Steve Liquid roster.
yeah, the good news is at least still have gotten a few mil off like re-signing or whatever. But the sad thing is he actually essentially got fucked the hardest because remember he just came in like he wasn't even supposed to be the jungler because Dardoch had that shit in the spring. They bring him in summer. He's really good, by the way. He wins the championship. Like, oh, this is awesome being in TSM. I was waiting for this, and then after that, it's just out blue balls the whole way for 2 years. Fucking hell, 2 years.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, but yeah, I mean, I definitely just feel bad for him in terms of like the situation he's in compared to like his level of play. So
People have said to me that they think Maple has been performing very well in Champions Queue and individually. What have your thoughts been playing against this guy since he came over to North America?
yeah, I think Maple's definitely good in Champs Q. I don't think he's like by far the best. I think, but he's definitely like right up there with like best people playing in Champs Q because I think there's a couple of people that don't play, but um he's definitely a grinder, which I really respect in that regard. Like he's always playing, so I really respect like his work ethic, especially for how long he's played as well. So
He's a mega
um,
veteran, yeah.
yeah, so it's really like inspiring to see as well as like this guy's playing just as much as like anyone, and he's just having fun with the game as well. So I think Maple's like really good. I think, but I think his champ pool like needs to be a bit different. But I think that's like not really his fault. I don't know what the coaching staff is doing behind the scenes there. It's like the Swain pick, like they're playing a lot, but like it's just being countered, and it's just not like looking too strong. Like sure, will win a couple games, like because the team's ending, but I don't think like the teams are necessarily playing around it well. So like when someone plays around the Swain ult well, then it looks a lot weaker than what the champ actually is. So I think his potential to be very good is there. It's just it's kind of being gated by draft.
What do you
It's
think, by the way, of how
also a
much?
passive pick, right? Like
Sure.
you're anticipating that people are going to play in the U, and when you're dealing with like their last game with Seraphine and Cassiopeia,
Casio,
it's
like
like how do you play
it's
Swain into that? You just
that's what I mean. Like they have like non-committal shit to throw at you, and then you're gonna have to pop your ult eventually, and then they just run away. So it's like your champ looks really weak, no matter like how well your lane phase went or anything like that. So it's like it's just a tough situation, and yeah, I mean it's hard to look like cohesive or like good at all when you're just given a bad hand.
What do you actually think of the whole Champions 2 topic? Because the problem is, since it was like initially obviously presented by players, like we need it to have like extra practice, then unfortunately fans took it as like, right, if anyone isn't playing it, hunt them down, spotlight, who's that guy over there? Like he's not playing any championship, fuck that guy. Like everyone obviously went too far the other way, right? What I want to get from you is what's the sense of like how much people play versus like if you're dedicated, are you the guy grinding? Because I notice if you look at the top ratings, a lot of the people who are top rated are actually like subs or academy players who are trying to prove themselves. Like I actually saw that like Berserker's top 5, so he must just be grinding like a motherfucker. But how would you explain to like fans, like if someone's dedicated, should they be playing Champions Queue? Is it useful? Does it matter if you don't, if you're still good in LCS? What's your take?
I think it's just like I think if you're an academy, I think you should definitely be grinding Champs Queue because I think that's like the best way to be noticed in terms of like gameplay. At least for me, that's just kind of the mindset I had. So when I was in academy, and I mean, I still play a lot of Champs Queue right now, so it's not like that's changed. But definitely, my mindset was I just need to play in Champs Queue, play against pretty much everyone, and just do the best I can, and just because I think that's like the best opportunity you're gonna be able to get.
It must help a lot to sort of get the other players to vet that you're actually good if they actually have to play in a real game, not solo queue. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure it shows off who's actually good in academy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like lane phase, counter picks, like all the meta stuff. It pretty much feels like a second set of scrims in that regard of like the meta is generally the same in Champs Queue as it is to scrim. So there's a lot of like similarities there, and then you can just show like who's very like confident in the matchups, like who's playing them well, and I think it's just a great avenue to showcase yourself. But in the regard that you need to grind every single day or something, I don't think that's accurate because like the system was previously where it's like whoever's going to play the most with the best win rate will get to the top. Right now, I think the win rate is kind of like skewed. Even if you have like a good win rate, but like even if you have a bad win rate, I think like you could be like one game above like 50-50 and then you're in like top 10 or something. So I think win rate right now is like a bit skewed with the MMR system in place. Like I don't think it's perfect, but it's definitely a step up of just plus 10 -5. But it's not exactly like solo queue in that regard of like the ladder is like accurate standing, but I think playing is definitely it shouldn't be like you're forced to play, but I think as a player is like what is your goal really? It's like where do you want to be? I think that was like a big key for me as well. Like where do I want to be at the end of the year was like a big step for me. It's like I want to be in LCS and actually like do well in LCS. That was like my goal coming into this year, and I just aligned myself with that goal and just did what I needed to do to get there. So I think Champs Queue is just like a avenue to help in that regard.
When you look at Champions Queue, is it coincidental that we have a lot more up and coming NA talent because teams are willing to take more risks these days on NA, like up and coming NA players, or is Champions Queue a big part of these NA players improving enough to be an LCS? Like, what percentage of each of these things do you think is true?
I think it
Because I'm
definitely
curious,
helps.
like, what you think Champions Queue effect has been.
Yeah, it definitely helps playing against like for an amateur player to play against like a LCS player. It definitely helps to like you're probably gonna lose, but it just depends like how much you can learn from the losses. But it's just like the same in solo queue. It's just really like how much you can learn from like losses. But I think Champs Queue gives you the opportunity to play against better players like all the time. So it's fast tracks your ability to improve. It's just the process of how you improve also needs to be like optimized for yourself. And I think that's like the big key. It's just availability of good players to compete against constantly is the biggest thing. So I think it definitely helps promote players into LCS and definitely gives like new players a better shot of just like improving fast compared to like solo queue where it's just like one trick's rampant, like there's not real like anything going on. So I think it's quite helpful.
To me, it's like I said earlier, I actually think the people it could help the most are the ones where basically you have like a Reddit narrative against, like the thing you said about Darshan. Here's the difference. If someone remembers Darshan from when they used to play him in LCS years ago, or they've only seen him in solo queue, they're not really going to have a sense actually, is he any good? They're just going to hear what other people say. Whereas if you had, here's the difference. Sure, you could meet him in solo queue, but because in solo queue, some of the other players are going to be randoms, no one's going to treat that seriously. It's the easiest game to dismiss ever and just go, oh, who cares, solo queue, or you would only do that in solo queue. In this, it's like playing a pickup game with other pros. So if you're actually good, you're going to be able to show it off. And if that guy's on your team, you're going to try harder in this than you're going to do in a random solo queue game, I'm sure. So like, because on some level you have to play it properly, you're going to get booted out of Champions queue, aren't you? So I actually think it could be really helpful for that, Monty. Like people in academy, the real problem is no one, like as your career shows, Dhokla, just being the best in academy doesn't get you an LCS, unfortunately. Like it's going to take more. It's going to take people noticing you, someone vouching for you. Sometimes a player maybe even ask for you. Like, because one area I could see this being really useful is, say you are a team like a TSM or a Team Liquid and the lineup isn't working, right? Odds are you're not going to go and sign a new player mid-split, but you might take a player out of academy or a player who's just like available. And if you played with someone into a bunch of pickups who actually looked good as like your jungler or something, maybe you bring him in. Like that's, I could see someone getting a shot like that.
Yeah, I think the current system in academy is really different, or like I think it could be changed, because I think the best players in academy won't get the opportunity to move up mid split, because I think like Team Liquid right now, like I don't think anyone's on that roster is going to be switched out for like their main team, right? So I think even though Team Liquid Academy is a very good and strong academy team, like their players are not going to be moved mid split, because like you're not going to trade the mid split most likely, because that's just going to be a complete shift in roster. So the opportunity isn't really there within like academy to move up mid split unless like you're within the same org. Like it's very rare that like you can move between teams mid split. Like the I think Chime is like real prime
That's a
example.
rare
Like
example. Yeah.
that's not really often at all, and I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think
Fair
a
enough.
system where like academy players can play an LCS team that are struggling while not being part of that org is definitely something that could be looked into. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but definitely like the best performing players in academy won't really have the opportunity, because they're also most likely going to be on teams that are like invested in their main LCS rosters as well. So it's definitely a hard situation to like really like prove yourself when you're doing well in
That's one
academy.
thing I actually hate about academy is like logically, and this is so fucked up, right? In theory, Monty, my dream as an academy player should be to be for Cloud9 or Team Liquid, right? Because they're the best teams. And if I did get a break, I'd want to replace like Alfari or something. But the joke is, my actual best chance is to be on a team like TSM and have the split go so badly that's not even that I'm good. I just get forked in the lineup. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like I can't be purposely trying to join shit teams in the hopes they get destroyed. Like that's no way to run a
Yeah.
career, is it?
Yeah, so it's like our situation. Like, do you value winning in academy, like, or do you value like having the best opportunity to like where you can see yourself promote? So it's definitely a
It's
tricky
tricky.
situation to be in. Yeah. So yeah.
What's exciting to me about the amateur player in Champs Queue is I think there's a really big opportunity coming up, which is when Worlds is in NA, for a lot of these Champs Queue players to get a lot of hype and show off their skills and learn just a fuck ton, because you're going to have basically 6 weeks, 7 weeks of all of the best players in the world being in North America in Champs Queue. So it really, I think it's a fun time to see if there are some rising NA stars that are going to put on surprising performances. Because the other thing is, there are going to be a bunch of streams in the lead up to Worlds of people just watching Champs Queue and evaluating
Yeah.
players, right? Because that's what always happens. Like, you'll see Cadril out there with like looking
Yeah.
at his like hunting down like the best lobbies in order to look at. I think Kobe's been streaming some of them as well, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a really fun time. And as far as NA talent goes, I think you're going to probably discover some gems just because they're suddenly thrust into a situation where they have better practice, and you're going to see some pretty rapid improvement with certain people in regards to these Champs Queue games. Is this
Yeah.
something that you guys talk about or you're looking forward to?
I'm not exactly sure if Champs is going to be online for Worlds. Like, I don't actually
I
know
mean,
the
it has
deal
to
around
be,
that. I
right?
mean,
Come on.
I don't know, because yeah, I mean, I just don't know how the system's gonna work. But I mean, I hope so.
I mean, it'd be
But
wild if it wasn't. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how it's gonna happen, because like it's kind of a process of getting everyone in the Discord, queuing up, languages, like, and not everyone's gonna be speaking English. I don't know if there's gonna be voice comms required or like right now it's not required to join voice comms, but I mean, I would like to see it be open and have everyone in here because I
I'm just waiting for the
definitely would not
drama.
like to play on 60 ping, right? But
I want to see when there's a game and some like super like fucking Korean Midland and just type some mad BM shit to someone like "fuck you LCS player." Like I'm waiting for some drama. I love the drama.
yeah. So I mean, definitely that's definitely going to be very hype, at least for me, just to play against like everyone. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Hopefully, I'm at Worlds as well, competing against them. But yeah, looking forward to just playing solo queue because it's definitely really fun. I think the last time Worlds was here, it was like I can't remember. Like, yeah, it was like season 7 or 6 or something. And then like Ruler was just smurfing on everyone when he was in NA. So it was like, let's just see if he continues to do that.
He's certainly having a good split so far. Do you watch a lot of LCK, or what do you normally like view yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I watch it. I watch it like the top teams, and then I don't really watch LPL too much, but I definitely watch LCK. It's just every time I watch, it's just surprising. Like Chovy's up like over 10 CS a minute every single game. Like T1's is kind of losing to like the bottom teams, like dropping a game at least every time. So I don't really know what the situation is there, but it's definitely pretty entertaining to watch.
Smart move is that you say you just watch like when like the team, because T1 stream a lot if you haven't seen. Like the reason why it's smart to watch the Zeus players, not only is probably the best top laner, but there's no fucking pro view anymore. So like that's making your version of pro view. You just get to watch the clicks of when he does in lane. Like that's legit. That's worth its weight in gold, mate.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. But even when pro view was a thing, like you wouldn't get it for the LCK region, but it would be available. Like they would show clips of it on stream, but you wouldn't be able to see it. So I don't really know what the situation is around that. But
you had to have an SKT telephone plan in order to. It would be like you had to have. Basically, it would be like you had to have like a Verizon or an O2 like telephone plan in order to access it, which obviously is like really annoying if you exist outside of Korea. And I don't understand why they couldn't just be like, geofence it. So if you live outside of Korea and you want to pay with like an American or European card, be able to access it and just fucking take my money, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, it's too complicated, I guess, but for Riot to figure that one out. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yep. Well, do you have any other questions about other teams, Thorin? I think we've run the gauntlet of LCS teams at this point in time.
Well, here's the thing. Technically, we only briefly addressed EG. We didn't really talk about much. So I would ask a little bit like that. Like, here's a question I have for you, Dhokla, because I was saying this on the call stream the other day. Even though, look, this is a tough thing to explain because on the one hand, I actually have a lot of respect for people who like gamble with their rosters when you're really good. Like I've often told Monty, the reason I think like Bill Belichick in the American football is a genius is because he really does know when to cut people who are really good, but next year they won't be. Like that's so to have the read for that is super hard in my opinion. It's really easy to have a good team and just stick with it and go, let's see how we do next year. But at the same time, sometimes I do think there are certain moves where it's like the two that I think are crazy is Impact and xMatty, the way they've been cut by teams in their careers. It's like, dude, these guys had like half their career to go still. So the Impact one's the crazy one to me, Dhokla. Like if I watch him play now, if you just take the nameplate off and he's in the playoffs, you would never know this guy was playing in like season 2. He's fucking sick, isn't he? Like every year he just he's got to be the best top player I've ever seen. Like knowing just how many like regular season games you cannot play properly before you have to start playing properly to actually be good in playoffs. Like he's got that formula like on a fucking blackboard in his room at the top of one of those towers he owns in Korea and just buys a new one every year and builds a Game of Thrones fucking city or Impact or whatever. This guy's amazing. He's just such a sick player. Like he's just mastered being a pro as far as I can tell. Dhokla, like is he actually good now when you play it?
I think Impact is definitely the best top laner in terms of just consistency plus gameplay. I think just it's really hard to like actually get a massive advantage on Impact. Like sure he'll like play games like on his limits in Champs Queue, but like in LCS it's like he's playing really well. Like his trade patterns are quite good, and then even if he's behind, he knows like how to like minimize his losses. Especially, I think that's like one of the key things about Impact. Like even if you have an advantage on him, like he'll play very well to like minimize the impact that you have on him relative to the game. So even when you have a lead on him, it's like really hard to snowball it through top. So I think that's definitely a trait that, it's like I can definitely improve at. And every time I play against him, it's really, I can definitely just learn a lot. So I hold him in very high regards, and I think there's a lot for me to learn from him, and especially like his career longevity. Like he's still like a top player for so long, so definitely really respect him for that as well.
I mean, barring the 100 Thieves game that we saw, where I felt that EG did a pretty not great job of playing out their win conditions. I think one thing that has impressed me has been EG has had, for the most part, really solid drafts this year. They have a very clear sense of their team identity and how they're going to play. The meta seems to be shifting into their favor when it comes to playing through Danny, which is something they've been doing for a lot of this year, but is now, I would argue, stronger given the shifts to the meta and the hyper carry, AD carry developing more and more. But it really just seems to me that this team is all on the same page when it comes to how do we want to get advantages with our composition in this game? How are we going to approach objectives? How are we going to snowball this lead? And it's been, for the most part, like I said, best of ones, obviously not the greatest in terms of gauging team strengths, and they did falter against 100 Thieves, but over the last few weeks, they've been really impressive when it comes to this, and they do seem that they're a cut above the other teams within the LCS right now by a pretty substantial margin.
Yeah, I think they're just like game sense of like, I think especially Inspired, I think his game sense of like just knowing what the right play is, like how to play most scenarios, especially around Rift as well, I think is very strong. So it's like it's really hard to make, like, even if you make a good decision, like he's able to like also make a good decision in the situation. Like when, like in our game against them, like we had priority like on the Rift, but like he just pulled it where like, and his top laner was pushing in top, so it's like even if we like sacked everything to get this Rift, like we'd still be like losing overall, even if we got the Rift. So it's like just small details like that. It's like what like top players do, where like even when they're like in a tricky spot where they're like down numbers, like they're still able to like make the most of the situation. So I think their decision making and all their players are just is very strong, and then they're very cohesive as well. So I think there's top team, and there's a lot to learn from them as well.
Have you noticed any particular flaws that you think they have? Are they the favorites to, like, overwhelming favorites to win the LCS? Is there anything that can be exploited that you think might slow them down as we head towards the playoffs?
I think Impact definitely has. He plays only a handful of champs, so it's really easy to like draft around him. So in that sense, so Inspired, I think he'll always be like solid in the jungle, but like that doesn't mean like you can't also like play well as well. Just because like another player is playing well, like you can also just play well and stick to the game plan just based off what your draft is. So I think like when you play against CG, you're just gonna have to play your best as well and just make the most of your opportunities. So it's definitely a real challenge. Like you definitely have to earn the win when you play them. So I definitely enjoy competing against them because it gives you like great sense of like we actually be a good team, not just like did nothing, kind of like wait for them to throw and won the game. So playing against them is definitely like most fun in the league for sure.
Good stuff. Well, any other teams, Thorin, you wanna go through? All right.
That's pretty much it.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Dokla. I appreciate your
Absolutely.
insight and everything. Really fun to talk to you. Well, we're going to take a break, guys. And when we get back, we'll have some viewer questions.
Right, now we're going to do the viewer questions. So we're not going to explain it every fucking time. You go on the Discord, the Insight Esports one, there's a Grogcoin channel, there's a pin thing. There we go. If you can't figure out beyond that, then you know what? Just ain't for you.
Go to another episode.
So, yeah, ain't for you. So not
go to
enough
another
clues for
episode
you.
where the description is. But yes, we are going to take the viewer questions. First up, did you guys ever think that out of all the ROX Tiger players that Peanut would still be playing top tier today? So that would be Prey, Gorilla, Kuro, Peanut, and Smeb. Peanut was the youngest one, so I guess it wasn't. It wouldn't be considered outrageous that he would still be playing, considering he was like the newest of the players and the youngest of the players. But obviously, I think besides Kuro, all of the other players were top tier at the time, and you think could have had longer careers overall.
I think he's fucked himself on that question, because here's how he's absolutely done himself. So first of all, Prey and Gorilla. Prey was old as fuck, so I already know he wouldn't be the one playing the longest. Gorilla also had played quite a few years. The others were the newer players, so I would already assume it's going to be the newer players. And then here's where you've actually fucked yourself. Peanut, a ROX Tigers player. He ain't my ROX Tigers player, mate. He wasn't there the first year. What are you talking about? He was there the second year, homie. So go help Lee and Hojin. Go ask them what they fucking think so. And then also, I'll add this in. If you think about who Peanut was, the reason he got onto ROX Tigers is he's like a mechanical prodigy. If you ever saw this guy on Najin, he was fucking skilled. So, like, look, I'm not saying it just to be a contrarian, but actually, of all the players on that team, if you consider his youth, the fact that he'd only joined the team because they were good and wasn't an original member and wasn't cast out by Esports, actually, he actually was one of the people who should have had a long career. I mean, sure, people like Smeb maybe should still be playing, but actually, I think Peanut he'd be fairly high up there at that. Basically, if you made that as like a crazy, like, can you believe it's Peanut? It's actually not that crazy. I know it might seem like it.
Yeah. What are the best analogies to describe traditional sports players by their esports equivalents for someone who doesn't watch traditional sports but watches a lot of esports? Okay, so we're reversing it. So we would be like the Michael, the Faker, League of Legends, like the basketball equivalent is Michael.
Bad news for you already. Right, as someone who's done this my entire career, all that happens is the person who vocally responds to what you say just goes, yeah, but how could he be like Faker because he never won 3 world championships? So they ruin everything, Monty. What they do is you go, he's like Faker because he was the dominant player for many years and could like reinvent his game. And then they go, yeah, but Faker won all the championships. See what I mean? They go, oh, I'm going to take the part of the analogy that you're not using though. And then that shows that, are you ready? He's not exactly that exact person identically. It's like, yeah, it's an analogy, you fuck. We know he's not the person. Spoiler, in this analogy we're going to give, none of the people are the people. We're saying they're like them. So, well, if we were doing a simile, we would say they are as a metaphor, right? So, go on then. Let's see. Because if basically, like the classic ones from sports are, he's the Michael Jordan of X, which usually just means he's like the far and away the best player, the GOAT or whatever. What are the other ones they normally do? The winningest. What are the other ones they normally say on that? Because obviously the faker angle for Michael Jordan is obviously the exact opposite one. It's like he's the faker of whatever game would be like he's the Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could do something like very like athletically talented, but maybe not like the best in terms of decision making could be one that you could do. So it would be like mechanically skilled, but maybe not skilled in terms of macro or like teamwork could be one that you could draw an analogy to. You know, you could make an analogy.
So give me one. Like who we doing for this?
Well, here's an interesting one for you. Like take a player like Score, for example, that had a very long career that was a decision-making, like a very intelligent decision-making, very stable, conservative style of player, right? Like who would be the equivalent of that? Who maybe doesn't take the most risks, but is like that franchise player that can guide the team. Maybe like Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that, because Aaron Rodgers never throws interceptions.
I know what you mean, but the problem with that is like Aaron Rodgers is too good for that analogy, I feel like. I would have said someone like Steve Nash or something, like a point guard that runs the team and is like consistent and understands everyone's strengths. Because to me, the thing with Score is the reason I don't blame him in his career for not winning. It's because he was the supportive element. It's like he was 1v9 in from jungle, was he? So essentially, yeah, I do blame the fucking laners for not winning those ones. So I think that's not a bad one. Not a bad analogy. What about
you could also do a player. I mean, Uzi would be somebody who was, propped up, like basically designed to hard carry a team where all of the resources are fed into him.
Even though this is more like a specific example, not like a thing, I'll tell you who the player Uzi I is. And this is, I'm purposely, it's a Thorin special because it's going to be accurate, interesting, and hurt your feelings. So you ready? Uzi I is Emmitt Smith from the Dallas Cowboys because he is one of the greatest of all time. And he had a lot of fucking help to do it that the other people in his position sure as fucking hell didn't. Because if you don't know, Emmitt Smith has like a legendary fucking O-line he's going behind. You go and look at what my boy like Barry Sanders, what he was going behind, mate. Like this is night and day. So the difference is, like in that scenario, Uzi I obviously probably of all the ADCs in history has had everything put his way as much as possible. If you're someone like Ruler, who are the people who are his peers, sometimes you're just Bing chilling, just fucking sat back going, "Can I play League of Legends?" And they're like, "Sorry, we're drafted for the solos." Like that's just the point is, Emmitt Smith could be the greatest running back of all time, but he had the most help to do it. I think that's like the same for Uzi I. There's an analogy.
There you go. Yeah, that's a fun one. There are a couple fun ones for you.
There you go.
Super teams in esports rarely work. What are some of your favorite colossal failures of super teams in real sports?
Oh, in real sports, that's a good one. Okay.
I feel like
Ooh.
most super teams are in sports like the NBA that I don't really follow.
There's
as
been
much.
tons in the NBA. Basically,
Yeah.
like the sad thing is this,
You
right?
can't really make a super team in the NFL, right?
The real problem they've had in the NBA is like they basically just ever since LeBron did that decision, that's what all the big superstars have done like every 3 years, and they've just, like I said earlier, they've just played God with everyone else's fucking money basically in the NFL. Like here's the problem, right? In the NFL, you can't really do it in my opinion. The only way you can make super teams in the NFL is like you just do the Tom Brady move. You have some twat come back for one more year who should just, by the way, in a legitimate good faith business, like someone like Gronkowski would have just been playing for a bad team, but for the most money a tight end gets paid and get paid at the end of his career. But instead, he comes back, he finds a way to finagle the contract to not be that good, even though you're way better than the contract is, and then you get to win by stacking players like that. Like veterans minimum has ruined most of all sports, mate.
Also, like the Tom Brady example, he was going on to a Bucks team with arguably the top wide
You're
receiver
lagging like
pair.
fuck right now. Just wait there a sec. Wait there a sec. I think it might be me, to be fair. I don't know.
Okay.
Try talking now. Yeah, there you go. You're back. You're back.
Yeah, I think what was so egregious about the Tom Brady thing was that he was going on to a Bucks roster with arguably the top wide receiver pairing in the NFL and a really good defense led by Shaq Barrett, and then also had the advantage of Gronk like coming out of retirement for one last ride, right? So
Antonio Brown. Oh, it's ridiculous, man. It's almost egregious of all time, in it. Yeah. Problem is you're lagging a little bit, but we could hear you mostly. I could got most of it. Let me think then of sports ones, because I'm trying to think what would a good sports one be. Because I'll try not to do an NBA one necessarily then, since you see you won't have it. Let me have a look.
No. You can do an NBA one. I just said I don't necessarily know those.
I mean, I personally think this Lakers team is one of the most egregious I've ever seen in my entire life. Because here's how fucking whack LeBron fans are, dude. All they do is they'll take a fact and just lie about it. Like, what they do is they do this, right, Monty? They go like, how can you say it's a super team, though? Like, some of those players haven't been good for years. Like, mate, they're in the same fucking draft class as LeBron. What are you talking about? Secondly, Russell Westbrook was like the MVP of the league like 5 years ago or something. Let me have a look what year he was MVP. I'm going to type this in. Westbrook MVP. Let's see. It was 2017 season. We're only in 2022 now. Right, spoiler, when these players 2 or 3 seasons, 5 seasons later join a team, that is a super team on paper. Like, mate, the players he had here, by the way, the joke is like half of this Lakers team will be in the Hall of Fame, mate. And this team didn't even make the playoffs. Like, they were making it through that bullshit. Like, oh, we might make that play-in. That play-in shouldn't even exist, by the way. It's just like, they made it like LCS playoffs where there's even more playoff spots at the bottom. So, like, every fucker makes it in Thieves. So there's one. That Lakers squad's a joke. I mean, people can claim it's not a super team. Well, then what is a super team then? I'm trying to think of any other really bad ones though, because let me think. Is there any? There must be at least one in the NFL. Let me think what the NFL equivalent would be.
It's really hard to do in the NFL because of the salary cap, and like you could argue that the Bucks did it, but then they won the Super Bowl, so was it really a failure?
That's true.
Was it really a failure? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think you can really do it in the NFL. I don't think you can, because I think the closest you could. Nah, I don't think it works even. Because like for example, I do think as a super team, it has to be before it was formed. Obviously, you can't be after the fact. Oh, they're only really good now. Like that's every fucking good team in history, you idiot. So that's a pretty bad one. I mean, the classic one. Like, here's what's funny. Everyone's going to say it, so I'll just address this one for you, shall I? Everyone will say it because this is where you know someone's a bozo. They'll go, "What about that 2004 Lakers team? Haha, Lakers team." By the way, that team where they had the 4 Hall of Famers, 2 of them were right at the end of their careers. Monty, Karl Malone literally retired at the end of that season because he was so injured in the season and had played something meant like 20 plus seasons, by the way, and had played every single game and was like an Iron Man. So the idea he's in a super team scenario. Gary Payton also was going off and off and off and off and off the boil and literally won the championship 2 seasons later as like a backup player coming off the fucking bench. And then Kobe and Shaq, like Shaq was up fucking injured, and then Kobe had a literal like court case during that season and had a fucked up knee. So it's like that's like notice how all you guys have to take out that context to make it a super team. I'll put in the context and it destroys the whole scenario. So there's actually not been that many out of being like, because they want it to be funny, like they egregiously fail. I'd say most super teams actually, the real tragedy is they blue ball you, don't they? Like they'll get to the playoffs or whatever and then they just don't win. So it's not that they truly fail. Like in this one you want it to be like, they come last place or something. It's hilarious. Like I don't think that happens too often in sports.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm a believer that mindset shifts rarely happen, and if they do, happen over several years. The LCS failing consistently over the years seemed the result of Riot's inability to self-reflect, solve problems, and deliver value. What do you think are the chances that they can turn it around? Because I think LCS just slowly fades into irrelevance. I mean, that's literally what's happening right now. I don't know how you fix it because I mean, basically, like, yeah, they're hiring new people, but the problem with what Riot is doing is that the people who caused these problems with the LCS are not getting removed or leaving. They are getting promoted above the people who are coming in. So they still have authority over these people. So I don't know how you solve the issue without actually directly changing the management. And it's probably too late, honestly. It's probably too late. I don't think League of Legends, it's shown like a small decline, I think, in NA player base since the pandemic, which is obvious. Like, it went up during the pandemic because people were staying home and playing video games. But I don't think you're going to see a big increase in the NA player base in League, especially as the game gets older. It gets constantly more complex and difficult to get into the more champions are in the game. So I don't know how you fix the problem. I think that trying to right the ship of the LCS is a job that's more or less a poison chalice right now, because you will never be able to affect real changes because you're locked in by the people who made bad decisions, who are your bosses, and they don't want to make those changes. And you're locked in by the fact that franchises were sold and you have partner teams that have certain expectations. So how do you make sweeping systemic changes? I mean, they can't even fucking change the world's format into double elimination. Like, they announced the dates and it's still not going to be double elim. You can tell from the dates they announced. So it's a shit show, guys. And they don't get rid of the people who made the bad choices. They just promote them. It's incredible. It really is incredible. So I don't know. I don't know how you solve it. I wouldn't want that job. Do you have any ideas about how
I'm
they
not
could
American, so I
possibly?
don't give a fuck, man. Fuck LCS.
I mean, I also don't care.
LCS can just go off on an island and fucking die. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't give a flying fuck.
Yeah. If anything, for me, guys, it's one less league that I have to watch, and
That's
that
actually good for us. Yeah.
I don't particularly enjoy. So I would actually like it to go away personally. Obviously, you both have come a long way from your respective humble beginnings to current success. Did you envision your current place in the world from the start and could see where the gaming industry was going? Or did you just get into it loving the game and woke up one day and realized you made it? Also been watching your guys' content for almost a decade now. Just want to say thanks for thousands of hours of free entertainment. You're welcome. I appreciate the kind words. I mean, I didn't expect for esports to become a real job, because I think when I started in 2004, 2005, it wasn't really a career option. So I just did it out of the love of it. And that was it. I never really had expectations about it becoming a career.
I personally think anyone who says they're actually old school, so anytime I'd say pre-2010, anyone who tells you that thing of like, I always knew it'd get like just exactly like, they're all liars. They're all full of shit. First of all, I know most of them and they didn't say all that shit back then. All you need to know is this, right? When I first came into esports, I've told this story before, I came in after the dot-com bubble broke into my job, and I was told by the early esports people, oh, it's a shame you missed esports, mate. It was a couple of years ago. We were all making money. It was hilarious. It's all gone now, of course. So I was basically told that there's never going to be an esports thing. It's just play out these silly little games. We're never going to be in the industry. Our chance came and went. The internet didn't work, sort of. Then you had in the 2010s, the whole financial crash. The same thing happened. If people don't know, there are tons of people took the fucking out and just took a few 100,000 and fucked off, or sold their team 3 years later for $1 million in LCS. Like, do you know how stupid those teams look now? Because here's what that shows. They never believed in it. They never really thought there was any future. They never knew a team would be worth $400 million, Monty, because they never sell the fucking LCS slot for $1 million. I'll tell you that from like now. So the joke is, like, almost no one in esports believed. In fact, I'd even say what held esports back for a solid 10 plus years is that all the people in the industry sold the pipe dream publicly of esports to trick people. It was a Ponzi scheme. The premise was, don't be the last one out, you idiot. Be the one who, when the new people come in with the money, you sell to that fool, the greater fool, and you get the fuck out with your $2 million. And then jokes on them. You spent like 500k for 10 years. You got 2 million, you're out. And then the joke was, You go and do your real dream, whatever the real world thing you want. Maybe you want to work in sports, you want to work in bigger in gaming industry. No one thought esports was going to be the thing. They're all full of shit when they pretend now, guys. I always knew it would. Not least because guess what? Esports itself succeeded, quite frankly, because of a bunch of black swan events. Like nobody knew League of Legends would be an enormous game. It's nonsense. League of Legends wasn't even the game out of the games it was competing with that was supposed to win. Twitch, same thing. No one thought streaming would be huge. Remember, I always tell people this. One of the reasons I find it so fucking offensively egregious when fans tell me what CS 1.6 players were like. There aren't even fucking streams. There's about 10 VODs on YouTube, you twat. And I know you didn't buy the game and install it and play the demo. And I know you don't even know how to play a demo from CS 1.3. But you're going to tell me how that player that you never watched played when I lived it, motherfucker. My favourite, Monty, is this one. It's when they tell me what Forrest was like, because here's what they don't know, because they don't know esports history. Forrest was on my team. I was fucking stood behind him when you like in games where you don't even have a demo. I was stood over his shoulder looking at his screen. I have the god fucking perspective. You're just going to tell me based on like a HLDV scoreboard, like, you're wrong about that, Thorin. He was a lot better than you're saying. Like, that's fans for you. So no one knew esports was going to be this big. I definitely didn't. And spoiler, I never got into this business ever. I'm not in it now just to make money and to be fit. To me, the cool thing is what you can do. It's the idea there's this space. I mean, sadly, a lot of this has eroded. Like, we're actually in a very privileged position. We can sort of do this. Essentially, what we're luckily able to grasp onto is that sort of frontier edge. We can still sort of do what we want. And if we can just get a little group of people together, a little bit of scratch to fucking fund it, then we can do all these cool ideas without needing the fucking behemoth sort of structure of esports. Sadly, though, that has, for other people, that has sort of been and gone. Like, the rest of you have to engage with that superstructure, sadly, or you're fucked. So I think in some ways, basically, I actually probably wouldn't have got an esports if I knew it was going to be like this. Like, this isn't really what I was aiming for. But more importantly, like, there was never any end goal to me, dude. I was just doing it because the games are fun, and then it's interesting to make an article, and it's cool to talk to a player and find out what he thinks. Like, to me, it always followed. That's why when people say stuff like what advice would you give? Like, give us some like inspirational. Yeah, here's the thing, mate. I didn't need it. Like, I'll summarize it with that story I've told a few times. My career basically is like that anecdote about Mozart, whether it's apocryphal or not. You know the one where a kid and his dad come up to Mozart, and then the kid goes like, Mozart, like, do you have any advice? Like, how do you like write symphonies or whatever when you're young like me? And he goes like, well, I'd just start, like with the scales and like, basic songs. And he goes, but you were doing whole symphonies when you were 8. And he's like, yeah, I didn't ask anyone how to do it, did I? That's my fucking career in a nutshell, mate. Enough said.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I just really enjoyed it, like you say, and I got into it, and I just enjoyed League of Legends because I had the opportunity to be in Riot's offices in closed beta, and I recognized that the game was going to be a good esport, and I started doing, founding my own news site and running my own tournaments so that I could have a place to broadcast, because I was a caster in Warcraft 3 and many other RTS games as well over the years. So I just made my own opportunity. And that's how I prefer to live my life. Is like, I just like to make content my way or analyze the game my way. And that's what I want to do. So I never thought it was going to be a career. And certainly nobody could have expected LoL to explode the way they did. And certainly nobody could have expected the technology of streaming and internet connectivity to come along and like converge at the exact right time to be able to watch live video streams. Because that used to be impossible in the early days of esports. You were just watching replays or demos of the tournaments, or there was some hacked together system to kind of stream
almost everything
you in real
almost
time.
All these mechanisms we're talking about, we could never, like, for example, social media, dude. Whoever knew there'd be social media? That wasn't even a thing. Like, if you were an esports fan, you were siloed off in some little shitty website. Yeah, like, no one would ever find it. Yeah, like the idea. Like, think about this. People don't understand the power that's had, dude. Like, think about how someone like Bjergsen, by the way, would have way less agency over his career if there was no Twitter. Like, he has like, what does he have? Like 1 million Twitter followers or something, mate.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
People, like, by the way, if you don't know, Shox is a great example of this. Shox is able to command an enormous day rate because look at her fucking socials. She has as many socials as like a real world like fucking pop singer or whatever. Like, she is on another level than anyone who does her job, basically, just because of that component. That's like a massive leverage point. So yeah, that's my point, is like, you could never see these things coming. Like, all I'll say is this, Monty, and I wonder if you share the sentiment. The only people who ever did talk like it could be like this were all the con men. They were all the guys just like they were talking out their arse, weren't they? Because there were people obviously that were going, "Oh, it'd be huge in 40." They half of them aren't. They're here now, by the way. And they all fucked off to trick someone else. They're probably all in crypto now, I imagine. You know. Like.
And by the way, guys, the new esports winter is definitely coming. Like you've seen the layoffs start.
This is the market correction for sure. Yeah.
So a lot of these teams were in a very precarious place because they were burning money. And if we go into a recession and already late stage investment in like late stage venture investment is drying up, and a lot of these teams need more money to continue operating.
We're relying on fucking crypto sponsorships as well.
And by the way, guys, I could just tell you straight up, the number of team owners that were like, we just need crypto to pay us a bunch of money as a bridge into our next funding round. Then the crypto market crashed. And by the way, every single crypto company right now is renegotiating those sponsorship deals. You think TSM is going to get that $200 million over 10 years?
It was 100 million. I told you there was no way that was like, because people acted like that was guaranteed money, mate. No way.
They're not going to get. So all of the crypto deals are collapsing right now. So the teams don't have the crypto money that they budgeted, or they're having reduced crypto money for the most part. And then they also have this problem of seed venture capital is still okay if you're in the early stage of investment. But I've heard from a lot of people that they're having big problems getting late stage VC right now. So you're going to see player salaries drop because they were unsustainable. Players were getting massively overpaid. And hopefully, I think probably some big teams are about to just go out of business. Frankly, I think we're going to see entire teams crash, and it'll be a consolidation, and it'll be good for the industry because people will finally have to fucking learn how to operate sustainably.
By the way, if you're one of the people out there like, lol, I told you crypto was a scam. By that logic, esports is a scam, you moron. Yep. You fucking moron. Think about it. Think about what we're saying. It's so mad. I love fans. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
I need to do a skit at some point. There needs to be a skit at some point, Money, where it's just me as Matthew McConaughey's character in Dazed and Confused, and I do that skit where he goes like, high school, except instead that's like esports plebs. The older I get, Monty, they stay the same fucking idiot, the same age. I have to do a skit like that. It'd fit my fucking persona at this point.
Butt Pounder 420 with the classic. I have never thought about this before, actually, but where is Bin Laden actually buried? Yeah, I guess they can't say because it would turn into some sort of fucked up pilgrimage site, probably. So
like, it's just the ocean, isn't it? Like they just did an ocean burial or whatever. Like, yeah, okay, mate. Yeah, sure.
But I understand why they can't say where he's actually buried, because it would be really weird. Like you can't tell people the location. Can you recommend any books that explain / capture something fundamental about your country's current cultural characteristics? For Brazil, I would recommend The Patriot by Lima Barreto. I've never heard of that book. So can you, I guess, like what books would capture like the essence of the culture?
I mean, the problem with that is, like, you're in the wrong fucking decade to ask that. Like, guess what? There is no culture anymore. Like, it's over. Like, the fucking globalists just ruined everything in the last 50. Were you missing what went on in the last 50 years? Like, the joke in the modern day, it's not a joke, is in the UK, people will imply if you put a UK flag up outside your house, you must be racist. That's the level that we're fucking on with the culture. The culture now is garbage, mate. So the problem is, I'd have to go off like something of like my nostalgic vision of it. So I would say if you wanted to capture like the best of like British culture or something, I'd say you read someone like, I don't know, like G.K. Chesterton or fucking C.S. Lewis. These are the people who sort of, they nail sort of the best parts of the British spirit, being a gentleman, chivalry, these components, the idea of bravery, all this stuff. But they also, they have enough of a nous to know that the world's dark as well, and there are things that like, there are evil fucking influences, and definitely everything's not peachy and all that shit. So I'd say people like that. Definitely from a bygone age, though.
I mean, I think in America, like, obviously, people look at Faulkner as being one of the kind of quintessential American authors. Melville, also, I mean, because like with America, you always have to deal with what American life was like that created current conditions, and I think Faulkner definitely speaks to a lot of that. So, yeah. I think that's probably fair. Cormac McCarthy would be like the modern version of Faulkner, even though he normally writes about stuff that happened in the past, but he certainly is a product of American culture and literature. Let's see here. This is a long one. Let's see. Let me read this. I'm not going to read it in advance, so I'll just read it out loud now. Do we read to think and learn, or to feel, or both? But don't we have to suspend our disbelief to meaning to avoid logic? Even if person A says, "What's the point in questioning stories?"
You're gonna fucking paste this in the chat. I've already stopped listening, mate. This is shit. Can you paste it in the chat so I can read it as well when you do it? 'Cause it's too hard to keep track of what you say.
Yeah,
this sounds shit already. This sounds basically like a fucking 16-year-old English student.
Oh,
it's like,
hold on.
I want Monty to tell me I'm really smart. Like,
stop insulting people before we even read it.
It was garbage what I heard already. Mate, the first sentence was so pretentious, it was fucking mental. Like I'll start. So it goes, do we read to think and learn, or to feel, or both? Like, it just stopped there if that was the question. Why is there more questions after that, by the way? How many questions is in this? This is like a fucking term paper for like a fucking philosophy class. I'm not doing that right now. Fuck that. There's like 7 questions in there.
That's been vetoed, apparently. Regarding the LoL rune bug, I think Riot could implement an automatic check right after champ select and when the game loads. Why should the fault be on the players for not double checking? The game is fucked, dude. Like, somebody has to check the runes. Like, it has to be the players in this situation. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to automatically check because players are making decisions about the runes. So ultimately, they have to be the one to double check when the game starts. That's just it.
Is what you have to do, because essentially you can set. I'm guessing you set the runes in champ select, but sometimes when you save it, it doesn't work. The bug, right, and it gives you no runes in the game. Is the logic like you have like a set amount of interval at the beginning of the game? You have to tell them before it's counted as a real game. How long do you get? Like a minute or something? What do you get?
I think once information is revealed, so that means that when like you see somebody on the map, so it can happen very quickly. Yeah, it can happen very quickly, actually, within the first minute of play. But you also have 15 seconds where you can't leave the fountain at the beginning of the game to quickly check your runes. So that's when you
basically religiously you just have to check at the beginning right now before you leave fountain. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yep. You have been tasked to make a Count of Monte Cristo movie based on Riot and the League of Legends esports scene. Who are some of your choices for notable characters? I mean, look, I would love to answer this question because it would require me to name a bunch of people that you guys don't know who basically put LoL esports in prison. Right. And then we'd have to have an optimistic take where somebody could actually break out of LoL esports prison and then get revenge on these people. But I'm not going to name these people because you wouldn't know them in the first place. And also not my style, right? Not my style to call these people out or to bring public ire against them as much as I personally dislike them. So, yeah. I mean,
I would just cast that guy Riot Magus as Seth MacFarlane just because I just think he looks like Seth MacFarlane. I've always said that, so that's all I would do. It's petty, but I would do it. It look just like him, by the way.
No, I think you're talking about Dustin Beck, right? Who is the
major Riot Magus?
I don't think so.
I think he does.
Oh, does he look like it? Okay, fair enough.
Have a look.
All right.
You tell me he doesn't look like Seth MacFarlane, the guy who just did Family Guy. I'll ask the audience. Look it up. Magus. He looks just like fucking Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously, without all the wit and comedy chops and all that. Well, I don't know. To be fair, some of the shit he's done with Riot is hilarious, unironically. The problem with that as well, Monty, is this as a question. It's not a bad question. The problem is an answer, though. The reason it wouldn't be as satisfying as an answer is, unfortunately, a lot of people won't know the actual character names, so it's going to be hard to even explain who would be who, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's very. I mean, there were like hundreds of characters in that book, so
decent question, though. Whatever.
Some teams have shown success this year by boot camping at unorthodox times, G2 during Worlds, XL during MSI. However, League is already known for a full calendar year, which causes burnout in players. If you were in charge of a team's practice schedule for the year, would you boot camp to optimize success? Yes, I think you have to. Like, the problem with the Western mentality is that somebody will always be practicing more than you in Asia. So if you have players that burn out, those are the wrong players. that's reality, guys. Like,
by the way, that's how the Asians do it. Like, if you don't, I've always said this about like Brood War and stuff, dude. That game is built and propped up on the like sort of like the metaphorical corpses of the bazillion players who didn't make it because they got burned out, etc. What they do in their space is they essentially don't care about mental health. So what they do is it's like some Squid Game shit. It's like, right, everyone, let's see who can mentally make it through this gauntlet. Oh, you didn't? Well, fuck it. Go on the scrap heap. Bring the guy who did make it. And so in this scenario, right, in the West, you're gonna have to do the same thing to keep up. Essentially, they're pre-selecting for the people who are the most hardcore soldiers, as it were, you know.
I hate to break it to you fucking Zoomers who love to just bang on about mental health on social media, but in competition, there is no mental health. Like, you either are cut out for it and you're going to do that grind no matter what, or you're not. And you probably shouldn't be in a highly competitive discipline. You should go to school and become an accountant where you can work anywhere and have a leisurely life, right?
I'd go one further. You know how in the game, the premise goes, like on certain champions, you're willing to trade like health or mana for the other guy's health or mana, depending on the matchup. That's what it's like with mental health. You just trade it. You just go, yeah, I'm going to take the hit. Oh, I'm going to have times where I'm going to be depressed. Yeah, but I'm going to try and be the best to ever play this game. By the way, spoiler, this is the mad thing about what we're doing in the West. We're totally fine in the West as long as it's optional. If you want to be Kobe Bryant and just practice to the nth degree and get paid millions, that's cool. It's not in esports because we've done this stupid thing. I think they've done it cynically, quite frankly, Monty. I think the reason they bang on about mental health is it's an excuse for why the West's always going to lose in League of Legends. Just a good excuse. It would be inhuman to make the players play. Well, then you won't win. I'm sorry, you just won't beat them.
Yeah, you know? and I'm not saying, I'm going to phrase this very carefully. I am not saying that people shouldn't take care of their mental health or learn how to optimize their own psychological well-being. But oftentimes it is easier to say you're taking a break for mental health than to work through the actual conflict that is causing the burnout within you. Obviously, there are many chemical imbalances or actual physical reasons that this could be happening. But if you have a lot of willpower and you really want to overcome that, I think many people can do that. And that's just what they do. So, yeah, people don't want to hear the answer to that, but yes, you have to boot camp. Certainly mental health is important, but also overcoming your own personal deficiencies will always be necessary to be your most competitive form. And
I also personally think that like the whole burnout thing is like a bit of a misnomer in League, because I think actually some elements of the circuit enhance and exacerbate burnout. Like, for example, I think having to go, no matter, even if you're from North America, if you play in the LCS, you can't live at home. You have to go to LA and live in the fucking house with the team. If you're from Europe, you could be from Germany. Doesn't matter. You have to go to Berlin and live in the gaming house. Like, the CSGO pros seem to have a way better pressure release by going home and having some time with their family. And then also the other thing is, I think Worlds is a fucking joke, mate. That's like a fucking month. That's mental. Like, what are you doing? So, like, the CSGO major lasts about 3 weeks total. Yeah. You're just there, that's it. And that's if you go to the final at the end. If you don't go top 8, you just play 2 weeks or 1 week, don't you? So, I actually think some of the burnout things are also just like the league schedule, you know. I think the league schedule's mental.
Yep. As an avid consumer of esports content, I've seen dozens of discussions about Moneyball in esports, which begs the question, has anyone in esports actually seen Moneyball? Always the question, of course. Always the question, of course. Because at the end of the film, the A's lose in the first round of the playoffs, and for the next 20 years peak at making semis a single time, while the highest paid rosters win like half of the next 20 titles. Yes. I mean, obviously, like, Moneyball's a great movie, and it's an interesting story about the Oakland A's team. And yes, they had that amazing, 22 game win streak during that season. But the miracle of the Oakland A's franchise is in a sport with an uncapped salary. They have been actually surprisingly competitive at making the playoffs with almost no money, right? And that's it, because Moneyball isn't about winning championships. It's about doing a lot with very few resources.
That's what's weird, dude. Like, right? Anyone who took, like, this is the way you do sport. No, the whole premise was essentially you took the sport that was the most strongly correlated with spending money and found an alternative approach that's more efficient in terms of the money. That's what, if anything, the whole premise of Moneyball is the fact that it could ever work is amazing. It's definitely not the idea, as you say, like everyone in esports is like, so we're all going to do that then. It's like, oh, that was never even the point. point was it? Come on, man. Like, here's the thing. If you talk about that angle, the other problem is this, Monty. It's always misapplied as a concept because people think Moneyball just means like, I saved money. It's like, that wasn't the premise. Like, I'll give you an example. I actually think you could say, like, the Astralis team in LEC right now is an example of Moneyball. So what you did was you spent fuck all as far as we can tell, but the way you got, like, actually a team that's probably better than they should be is you gambled on, like, some, like, Korean guy no one knows but has good mechanics. Not a bad gamble. Going to be nice and cheap for a test. You got a super old veteran in Vizicachi who probably isn't that good individually, but just has a mega brain. So you got a shotcaller out of nowhere that's way better than you should do. Cersei was always a slightly better jungler than people give him credit for. Kobe is not bad. Like, this is actually a team I think, you look, there's not a single star player or big name here, mate. Like, there's no real big name on this team. But you look at the roster, like, it's way better than the sum of its parts. I think they nailed it, and they probably spent fuck all for this team fight to guess. I bet it's one of the cheapest teams in the whole league, easily.
Yeah. So I think in all honesty, like most teams, because there isn't going to be a substantial income difference for teams if they're 10th place or 5th place in these leagues, because they've been set up poorly in terms of their ability to monetize. I think most teams are operating on that model, or will be operating on that Moneyball model, which is like try and get a slight edge to be slightly better, maybe make playoffs, and then get dumpstered by teams spending a lot of money. I think that's just how it is. Thank you for your opera recommendations and film recommendations. Still trying to track down the interview with Hugo Weaving. I've so far found opera is best consumed actively watching and not background music. Question, Monty, why no mention of French operas? Don't tell me you're sleeping on Bizet. I'm actually not super familiar with French opera. Most of my education was based off of Russian, German, or Italian operas, so I'm not the best person to ask about that. As far as watching operas, I mean, yes, they're a extraordinarily spectacular medium, right? And there's tons of ways to do it. The Met Opera, you can even watch live broadcasts from the Met in New York at movie theaters around the country, which is really fun. And there are libraries of this stuff online too. So I enjoy it. Who in esports could be a good stand-up comedian?
I mean, me.
Sure.
Well, being humble. It's probably my best fucking quality, right?
I mean, Raz is pretty funny.
He's not bad. Let me think. Because the thing is, to me...
Avali, maybe?
Who would I put into this mix? She'd be okay, I think. Let me think. Who would actually fit it, though? I'm trying to think if there's any good players who would be a good one. I don't really know, actually. It's a hard one. I actually think it takes like a pretty good skill stack to be a stand-up comedian. Like, you have to, on the one hand, be able to like execute material you thought up. Sometimes impromptu, throw stuff in there. You have to have camera presence, etc. Who would I pick for this?
I think it's what the pro players struggle with is being clever with language. That's the big flaw a lot of the time. People,
you know what? I actually think based on TikToks, I actually think the girls who do the LEC could all do it, mate. Like some of their TikTok, like the Shocks and Doubling, they're pretty funny actually. They get good angles on like because what they do basically is they take TikTok trends that are obviously like wider cultural trends, and they find like an esports way to make it work in like esports. So like Shocks will often do like the player, Doubling will do some like in-game related thing to do with like she plays like mid lane or something. So like they actually, some of those are pretty funny actually. I find they do a pretty good job. So they could probably do it. They have their own camera presence, etc. You know.
Yep.
I think they could do it.
Opinions on the changes to the LDL format with what they call fearless mode. I think so I've seen different opinions on this because I think it's probably going to help because it will expose players to being forced to play wider champion pools and play many different matchups. The counter argument is that it trains you to play matchups and champions that may not exist at the professional level. So it gives you useless skills. But I think versatility and coming to terms with the pressure of being in a match where you have to perform on something you may not be entirely comfortable with is more valuable for developing pro players than the actual, maybe I don't play this champion in my career. So I think as an amateur format, it's extremely good. I think it's a professional format. It's obviously bullshit because it just handicaps a team that's winning. But when the goal isn't winning, which is what the amateur league should be, they should be about developing players. I think it's good. And I think that mostly the arguments about it teaches players useless skills are nonsense because those hard skills of playing that champion may be useless, but the soft skills of getting in the right mentality, figuring things out on the fly, problem solving in tough situations, I think are much more valuable to develop.
I forget which game. I think it might be Rainbow Six or something like that, believe it or not. But I believe Gio, who I do my show with, the Valorant Talk Show, it's actually on my YouTube channel, not one of these ones. Right? When I do my show with her, I believe she said, I think it was Rainbow Six had a similar thing, Monty, with like the agents or what it operates or whatever they're called in the game, where I think they had a similar thing where if you used one on like the first game, it couldn't be on like the next ones. I think she said it was some game she worked with. So this concept has existed in other esports games. I think it's terrible personally. Like, first of all, if any of you go, sounds interesting, to really spice things up, you're not a fan of my esport. Get the fuck out. I hate people who are bored of the game. Like, they come into my CSGO and go, these maps are all boring. Well, then fucking shift on, mate. Your saloon's the one next in town. We love this saloon, you wanker. We'll leave the maps that are good to us. So I personally think it's whack. Because you know, like, the angle that they're going to say is good is like, well, you never have to see the same matchup 3 times. So you mean if you can't deal with a matchup, the game just gives you a free pass and you go to the next? No, there is no go next. Like, one thing I hate, this is a side rant, but I actually hate it, Monty. In the NBA, they've done this a bunch of times. In the NBA, there were people who were too good, Monty, and they changed the rules so they couldn't do that stuff anymore. Yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. One of my favourites, a lot of people don't know this. You know when people make fun of Charles Barkley, like, lol, doesn't even have a ring. Charles Barkley was so dominant as a short power forward. By the way, that's a height position. A short power forwards, they had to change the rules for how long you're allowed to back a player down, because otherwise, this is not a joke, he could just back you down indefinitely till he was under the basket, turn around and score every time. And so a guy who was 6'4" was leading the NBA in field goal percentage over like motherfuckers like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, like people like the fucking gods of the game, you morons. So essentially, I think it's whack that if you're really good at something, they go like, dude, imagine if that's like if you were like, oh, fake, you're a bit too good actually. We're gonna just nerf all the abilities of the
they did that.
They sort of did, like, yeah, but you know what I mean? Like that, I think that's whack. So to me,
that literally happened.
If you're good at something, congrats. And if I can't figure out how to beat it, tough shit for me. You should be rewarded for being good at something. Because I just think of all the great series in history, Monty. They'd all be shit if you couldn't have the same draft run back ever again. In fact, I've always thought, to me, the most gangster move in League, either individually or as a team, is when you just beat the guy on both sides of a matchup. I think that's sick as fuck. I love that one where Smeb just took fucking Hooney's thing and was like, you can play it, I'll dick on you. Oh, probably because of the draft. Oh no, I'll take it and dick you as well. I love that. I think that's the ultimate way to humiliate them.
Agreed. That's why I'm not a fan of it at the pro level, but at the amateur level, I think it's interesting.
Just like a one-off tournament. Like if you did like an all-star tournament, maybe that'd be fun.
Oh yeah, that would be fun actually. Will there ever be viewer questions for the Best Damn League show or for the Monty and Wolf show? Probably not, because those shows are intended to be shorter, and you guys ask a lot of questions that require very long answers. So I will say maybe, but it would have to be like 1 or 2 questions only. Also to your point, I saw a recommendation that they do lock-in tournament for LCS on the LDL format. That might be interesting. It doesn't have any bearing on the season. It would be a fun way to spice things up at the start of the year. So I wouldn't be against that. Perkz' team have only had great macro when he was alongside legendary / mega veteran jungles and support, Trick, Yankos, Mithy. I feel perception of his in-game shot calling is overstated because of all his other leadership qualities. To make a CSGO analogy, is Perkz' shot calling closer to an IGL or a player who can make sick mid-round calls? I mean, Blabber has a lot of experience and is a multiple-time MVP in the LCS, so I don't know if I necessarily agree with the framing of the question.
For some reason, I am trapped in a hellscape where the only discussions I'm ever allowed to have about shot calling are that everyone does it exactly democratically, or one person sits like a fucking anime protagonist and plots out everything in the game 17 steps ahead. They're both ridiculous fucking scenarios. So A, none of us have any clue what Perkz' shot calling is like. We haven't been in a game and heard his comms. B, we can infer though from all the different teams he was in which ones were good and which ones seemed like they could adapt in the mid game and make mid-round call. Sure, we can infer that. So we can infer, if you just look at all the teams he's been in, that despite what you say, he is a component of teams that have had fantastic shot calling / ability to adapt. Now the problem with that is that doesn't mean you can just put him like on cloud 9 with a bunch of randoms and go, Go on then, just say words out your mouth and that'll translate and their brain will know what to do. Like, if they're not on the same page, it doesn't matter what you shot call, mate. So my problem with this topic is, as far as I can tell, you just want us to agree with you. Like, yeah, Perkz actually isn't that great at shot caller, but like, on what basis? All you've done is just say, since these players were really smart, also, by the way, we're also assuming that, and they played with him, and that's when they were good. I think what you've nailed there, mate, you've actually just nailed what I said at the beginning. You need more than one fucking player. It's not about one player doing it, is it? So I by the way, a spoiler, I even think Kai never really did it all. Yes, the comms were all of that, but if you know anything about the personality dynamics in Cloud9, one of the best things about Meteos is he's the jungler who will tell someone to fuck off and won't come and gank. So I always thought it was like the interaction between them, and then in draft elimination, like, to me it was the mix of the three that was making it, and then they had coaches and all the rest of it. So I think the problem with this topic basically is, I think it's the other way around. I think you all think Perkz sucks at shot calling, because when you put him on teams with people who have no clue or don't have any sense of how he wants to play, it looks shit. I actually think the joke is this. To me, what shows that he has shot calling skills is Cloud9. Because when I watched that Cloud9 teammate, he wasn't in good form individually, and he would just have to go for, like, you know, we were talking about that discussion.
He clutched out a game in the finals that they won.
You know the discussion we had on the watch party about Bjergsen, about how he's always looking for that last like flank in a game he's losing. That's what Perkz did all the time on Cloud9. He, every time the game was going to completely be lost, he would just sort of like do a really quick triage assessment and go,
play.
Yeah, he'd go, what ridiculous play could I do now that would win me the game? But spoil it, if they don't follow up, that happened a lot. I look like an utter idiot who just entered for no reason. The game's over. The difference is he was willing to go for that play. So that suggests to me he has an idea at all times of win conditions, what you can do. So I get the premise of the question, but basically I actually think you've nailed the issue there. He needs another player like that, because I think every team does. I don't think any team in history is one great IGL / shot caller / leader. I think the best is you probably want two. You probably want a couple of people, and in this scenario, but he's also a fucking mid laner. You're naming all junglers and supports, like they have way more.
That's what he said. He's always had when he was alongside good junglers and supports.
Yes, but logically, they're the players who have more fucking brain cycles to dedicate to that, don't they? So I think logically, it makes sense that a player like that should be another player contributing along with him. That's my take.
I Will Dominate has expressed interest in coaching one day. Oh, please, God, no. Say that day was today. Which team, EU or NA, would you like to see him cut his teeth on, and why? So the reason why I say, oh, God, no, is because the frustration is that it's not about Dom's game knowledge, which is obviously very good. It's about the actual frustration of working with personalities. And I think he would go crazy if he were to try and coach an NA team out of his own personal frustration. So I hope he doesn't do that. I hope he's happy continuing to make the great content that he makes. I've said the same thing about LS. Like, I don't know why LS would want to coach Cloud9 or T1 for that matter.
I don't know, by the way, I think, unless Dom said something separate, if he's talking about, because I once asked him on a show not that long ago, did he ever want to coach? It wasn't quite like that. It wasn't that he was like, yeah, I want to coach. I think his was more like, if like he got an amazing offer for like a super duper team. I think it's more just that he's thought about it a lot and he'd like to maybe like give it a try. But it wasn't like it was like his set goal or he's going to. I think it was more just like he might do it if it was like a perfect scenario. And even then, I got the vibe. It's more just because it's true when you're giving great ideas all the time. Eventually, you want to see some of them put into action.
Right.
You know, sort of that. I got that sort of vibe. You know?
I think it's as somebody who's done it myself, it's a trap, and it's really annoying. And I would never go back to coaching. I hope Dom never does it. I think he'll just be happier. Do you guys ever feel a bit off when you have to talk LEC and LCS and call players like Humanoid and Jensen monsters after discussing players like Knight or Chovy in your LPL and LCK shows? It's all relative, right? And like, at least in Jensen and Humanoid's place, they put up competent performances on the world stage. That's not outrageous. Obviously, Knight and Chovy are extremely impressive players in their own right, but they're not without their own flaws.
I mean, I think it's like you said, it's all just relevant, isn't it? Like, Jensen is a monster compared to the LCS historically. He was one of the greatest players to ever play in the region. Like, why? Like, just because someone better in Korea, like, because here's the thing, the reason why I know that's like, the problem you're having there is you can't like put yourself in our shoes, but you can. Because think about it, right? Just think for a second. You know how much talent there is in Korea and China. You think there isn't a random guy on solo queue who never played on an LCK team who's better than Bjergsen? Of course there fucking is. Now, does that haunt you? Can you now not watch Bjergsen play? Oh, God, but what about that Korean guy? Like, no, there's loads of those players. I don't worry about it, like you say. Basically, the good thing about League, actually, I find it the easiest, Monty. Because what I do is you go into these domestic leagues, right? This is all that exists now. This little world, I'm going to pretend LEC's the whole world. And I just comment on that. And then we go international. And instantly, of course, I demote all the players. No one's elite. Like, I think it's easy. It's not that hard. I think League's one of the easier games to do it in, to be fair. And I've always thought League, the game, because the champions are OP and all that shit, it's already the game where everything's relative, isn't it? Like, the joke is I'm dunking all these gangplanks. They are actually the best Western gangplanks. It's just the problem is if I watch all the fucking LCK, I'm just going to hate these guys, aren't I? Like, that's the issue.
You are tasked with rehabilitating a delusional TSM fan over a Korean sauna trip. Oh man, I have to be naked with a TSM fan. Yikes. What are some heart-to-heart conversations you would have with this guy to convert him into an LPL LCK enjoyer? How would you dispel...
Well, I'll tell you something. In the Korean saunas, mate, they don't even pretend to avert their gaze. They just look right at the shit. You walk in there, and it's like, you may as well be walking down the catwalk. There's just all, the second you walk in, every old fucking Korean guy's eyes straight on my dick, straight to my dick, straight on my dick. Like, what is that? What the fuck? Because one thing that's weird if people don't know about Korean saunas is I think they're all gender segregated, right? You're not actually allowed, as far as I know, to have...
So there are parts of them, like there's the private baths where you're naked, but then you can put on like t-shirts and shorts and go into the mixed gender parts. So there are, in most of the Jim Chilbang, there are separate and together.
Especially because of where I come from in the northeast of England. Like, essentially, if you don't know, the wrong sort of eye contact is considered like threatening, you know. So I'm walking in like, and then everyone's looking. I was even looking down going like, wait a minute, are they... oh fuck!
I love Korean saunas.
It's wild as fuck. So anyway, yeah. What do we have to do? We have to, in a sauna, we have to somehow deprogram.
Convert him to an LPL LCK enjoyer. How would you dispel the brainwashing and copium/hopium formed around Regilita, Bjergsen, and Doublelift? Look, I think you get into a nice hot pool of water where they're all relaxed, or the nice sauna, and you tell them the story, because like what they love about this TSM team is the relatability, the fact that it was a grassroots organization where they were doing all these like homegrown vlogs and it seemed real. Tell them the story of the ROX Tigers, how this team had no money to pay for air conditioning, became one of the best teams in the world, was insanely outgoing, fun to watch. Like, they missed out on all of this, except they were much more competitive at an international level. But that's what people enjoy. They like the likability and the personalities of TSM and the fact that it felt real. And I think the closest thing to that was like prime era ROX Tigers.
The thing I don't get about this, right, it's actually one of the reasons I do look down on average League of Legends fans. I don't believe you guys are actually seeing anything like what we're seeing. I think you actually are just morons watching a fireworks show.
That's why you have to tell the story of the ROX Tigers and not talk about the actual gameplay. That's the argument, right?
The reason I say this is because, to me, I'm not exaggerating, from the moment I began watching the LPL in like 2013 or something, I was like, this is just fucking NA region, but with better players. Like, how could they not? How could anyone love those NA Rams and then not want to watch all these insane constant fights in the LPL from all those years back? That's how I know you have no eye test fans, because it's just, first of all, it's the most action. If what you come for is action, if you claim that, if you didn't like it, they always to claim like, Korean League Legends is boring, it's all just like slow macro games. LPL was never that, but you just won't tune in. You won't watch. And also, the other problem is this, Monty. I actually think the real thing you'd have to do, unfortunately, and this is the part I don't think you could ever bridge this gap, you'd have to convince them to watch VODs, basically, because the real problem is the time zone, isn't it? Like, so many people wouldn't be able to watch live. If you haven't noticed in esports, one of the reasons I think esports is a bit fraudulent is the sheer amount of people who will never watch a game that isn't live is nuts, mate. It's mental. Like, people will rather watch a shit game live than the best game ever on a VOD.
Like, and like, I don't really watch. Yeah, I mean, I don't really even watch live games, and I haven't for years.
You can't. There's not enough time in the day, is there?
Right. It's just too many breaks, too much downtime.
15-minute slow build up with no kills and one dragon taken. I can't watch any more of those.
No, I just like skip through with like, dude, YouTube VODs and the keys J and L, which skip forward and back 10 seconds, are my best friends.
Now you know, though, by the way, dude, now you know how I leveled up my knowledge in sports I never followed as a child, like NBA. What I did was I just downloaded like 10 years worth worth of it, and I just used the forward and backwards on Winamp, which went back and forwards 5 seconds, and I just watched decades of it, mate. But I never had to, all the downtime, I just cut it out, basically. That's why it's insane. I just watched like 10 years in like a year or something. It was mental.
What champion or mechanic do you think League needs to remove or add to the game? Please get rid of Yuumi. Aphelios is also super egregious because Yuumi is bullshit and terrible to watch at a professional level. And Aphelios is just, well, I think Aphelios has significantly more skill expression. It's
That's
also
loads.
it's just a terrible champion from to understand what the fuck he's doing from a visual design perspective. Because the main problem with Aphelios is instead of just using real world guns that people would understand, so he like switches from a sniper rifle to a shotgun or something, they use fantasy guns. So then you have to memorize the fucking like weird ass alien guns, and it's so terrible from an accessibility and design. It's so bad. But
listen, if we're talking about removing like a mechanism, like I would instantly remove any ability to be invulnerable or untargetable. I think that is mental. Because here's what I don't get about it. It's one thing if you just had like I'll give you an obvious example, Monty. You could make an item like a Zonya's, that's fine. That's an item. You have to pay for that item. The idea there's just abilities that make you go invulnerable or untargetable. What the fuck's the point of that? I think that is just actually a bad design. Just bad design in my opinion.
Do you think it's Grabs that values xMatty over Crowny, or does someone else decide the roster than the head coach? I don't know at BDS who it is.
I heard from a little bird that it is the coaching staff. I don't know specifically if it's Grabs, but I heard the coaching staff are the ones who made that call, and that in theory, Crownshot is the better player, but he didn't get the call up, and that they picked xMatty instead. So
I mean, Crownshot is the better player. I don't think that's even really an argument. I would think that Grabs of all people could see through the Scrim God argument and would at least give an experienced player like Crownshot a try after this amount of games. I agree. I don't get it. Maybe it's an attitude thing. I like Crownshot personally, so I find it confusing.
I'll just say this. One of the things that will always confuse fans is coaches look for different things in players than we do. Like, for example, what you're basically saying there is, sight unseen, because you can't know what happens in scrims if they use Crownshot. Sight unseen, you think Crownshot's a better ADC, so you assume they would win more games in LEC. Well, the problem becomes, is that their number one priority? And that's not a simpler question, by the way. The answer shouldn't be yes. Because if they start now and they win as many games as they can in LEC, maybe they still come 7th place, don't make playoffs, and don't go to Worlds anyway. So in that case, what did you accomplish over this split? Well, you took a roster that you were trying to make work, hijacked it, just put in a decent player, won like 3 more games, and then didn't do anything anyway, and it all break up. So what I would say is this. Maybe, and I have to purely speculate here, obviously, maybe there's something about how xMatty plays or communicates that Grabs prefers, and he thinks for the long-term goal of the team to be a great team, that actually it's better to have this player, and maybe he's trying to bring him in. Because all I'll say is this. I will say xMatty is giving me like Kazi vibes, where when I watch them, like not literally they're equal, but as in when I watch them, I don't think they're very good. But then behind the scenes, there are always these people who go to bat for them, and there's clearly some other qualities they have that other people value highly that I either don't see or I don't value as highly, you know.
Is 2022 the year with the most failed super teams in LoL? Fnatic, Vitality, Team Liquid. It's looking that way. I can't think of. Yeah, I mean, usually there's only. Yeah, there's usually only like 1 or 2 failed super teams. There are a lot right now. Obviously, jury's out. Like maybe Team Liquid gets it together and we change our minds about this, but it's not.
Well, the problem is the
great.
eye test. The eye test for me tells me that even if they make Worlds or they're never going to be like really good. Like if they were, that team would have gelled by now, mate. Come on, that lineup's just never going to go anywhere, I don't think.
Yep. Aliens have invaded Earth. To defend the Earth, you have to choose a group of 5 Western players to win Worlds, or players who played in a Western region, starting from Season 3 and onwards. What year and which players do you choose? Wow. Okay, so we have to pick a specific year and players from that year. It's still probably
just go early, right? If we want to have a chance to win.
It's probably 2015, right? When both the European teams made semis.
Yep, that was 2015, yeah.
I think you probably smashed together Origin and Fnatic from those years, and maybe you have a chance to win. Because that was the year when Korea was actually at its weakest too, because that was after the Korean exodus, and SKT was worse than people think. Basically, would be my argument.
It'd probably be that sort of era, yeah. Because it's going to have to be early on, because we're going to have to pick people like the ones who actually showed they could actually compete against the Koreans. Like, it has to be like the Soazes of the world, or Diamond Prox, or Miffy or something. Yeah, it's got to be these sorts of players, hasn't it? Yeah. That's the era, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, you could pick some banger players. Like, think about how many players are. You could take Forgiven's back then. That was at the beginning of his peak in SK. Forgiven, by the way, was as good as all the ADCs.
Yep.
Suarez is fucking god tier. Diamond Prox is a banger. As you say, Mithy's a pretty good shout. And by the way, people won't even know, but back then Mithy even had good mechanics. Like, I know now you all think he's just a brain. He used to have a banger thresh back then, mate. He had some really good skills.
What do you think of the new LCK contract policies? Watch the beginning of the show. We talk about that for an hour. Can we have an intervention? LCS broadcast won't stop eating spicy things as a joke. I mean, the joke is that they're stuck in like 2015 YouTube for some reason. Like, like find a different punishment, guys. It's not that interesting. It's not that interesting. What player would you say in League history had their career most ruined by being on bad teams relative to their value? An example I'd give is Froggen being a top tier mid even towards the end of his career, but only ever getting on 8th place style teams and him having to hard carry them into playoffs. So that's a good example.
What was the end of the question? Something about the value, though, like as in being on
which,
the bad team.
What player would you say in League history had their career most ruined by being on bad teams relative to their value? So like their legacy shit on, basically.
You know, the sad thing is, I've said this before, but I actually think the number one for me is Forgiven, because I actually think, Monty, the only reason he became as bad as he was socially is because those first few teams were so bad / flawed. Like, essentially, until he got to the Roccat team, there was always some key flaw in those teams. Like, some player was like not practicing, or someone was washed, or someone was a rookie that never was going to make it, or someone was an old player who should retire. And then by the time he actually got good players, because I've seen this happen a lot in CSGO, by the way, you get a player who's amazing. I think this is what happened to the player Nico, if people don't know, in CSGO. They're an amazing player, but they're on a bad team. And the problem with that is this, Monty. When you're an amazing player on a bad team, they have to let you do whatever you want because you're the only win condition. And in doing so, I think it makes you develop in a really unhealthy way. Whereas instead, if you come into the game and you have like appropriate level teammates, I think it makes you learn like how to share, how to be a good teammate, how to comm properly, how not to blame other people and think you're the one who did everything right. Like, I think if you're too skilled and you have too many early teams that are whack, I think essentially like it makes you too intense and extreme a personality, I think. So I think Forgiven's a pretty good one. I think his career could have the joke is the way his career did go is almost the worst I could imagine in terms of the results. Like, there's a million other ways where he wins LEC and he's like, dude, you think he couldn't have been in a G2 type super team? He was an amazing player. And by the way, behind the scenes, all the other players think he was sick. I don't care what they say publicly. They might trash him publicly. He's the guy, by the way, where the ones who actually played with him on his teams or against him in scrims will tell you this guy was unfucking believable. He really was like an all-world player.
Here's an interesting one. Deft, maybe, honestly. Like, relative to his skill, it's not that Deft hasn't been on very good teams, but I think Deft has often, over his very long career, been on rather middling rosters a lot of the time relative to his status as like,
whack, haven't they?
Like an all-time great player. He's still performing extremely well.
He's still a good player the last few years as well. Like, don't look at his teams. He's good. He's good pretty much all the time, in my opinion.
Yeah. So now people would certainly be like, Deft is a Hall of Fame AD carry player, and that's true. But I think he probably could have accomplished more had he been on better teams.
Be number one in that role.
Yeah, you could certainly make a shot at all time had he had better teammates for a lot of his career. All right, that's the last question that we've asked in the Discord, guys. We are not going to have a show next week because I have to go to a wedding this weekend, so I will not be able to watch many of the games, and my opinions will be useless. So, and also I will not be here on our normal recording time. So we will be back on August 8th for more Summoning Insight. Tragically, this means that we're going to be late to discuss the T1 versus Gen G game. That does hurt me quite a bit because I'm very much looking forward to that. But we'll still have Competitive Edge this week before I leave, so you guys can look forward to that. And so the content will still be coming, but this show and Monty and Wolf show not going to be happening next week, just as an announcement. So we'll see you August 8th.